Hey guys. This is part 27 of What If Naruto Was Sealed and Woke Up After 2,000 Years. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 64. This has to be done. Location Earth. As Miranda woke up, she noticed the other side of the bed was empty. She didn't worry. She knew where Ruko was. She dressed herself in a sarong and went out to the beach. That's where she found Ruko, watching the horizon. The dawn's creeping orange light was already emerging. You do this every morning, she told the blonde. Every evening too. Yeah, and each time it's different, Ruko said, sitting on the shore, eyes on the horizon. She came here straight from bed, which meant she didn't put anything on. It was okay since no one would accidentally find them. Ever since they came back from the collector base, after Naruto was arrested, the Normandy clan scattered. Miranda took Ruko back to Earth. To keep her safe and fulfill one of her dreams, took her to a private island close to Isla del Sol. It was owned by her father through various shell corporations, which gave them time before they were found. The sun slowly began to appear, turning the orange brighter with each minute. Miranda could admit it was beautiful. But when she looked at Ruko, her lover was somber. She knew why. Thinking about Naruto? Her fingers tightened on her arms. I could have done something, she said. I should have done something. She should have blasted all those fucking soldiers out the nearest airlock, grabbed her brother, and ran. If you had, you would have been killed. He was protecting you. Her grip lessened and the frustration dimmed in her eyes. I know, she said quietly. She didn't like it, but she knew. She was just angry with Naruto for going like that, without a fight. She wanted to punch him for that stupidity. She didn't even know where they took him. Miranda sat down beside her. I got word from one of my contacts. It seems the tribe is being exterminated with extreme prejudice. Good, she growled. That was good news. After everything they had to put up with regarding the tribe, she was glad they were being exterminated. What about the Akatsuki? That's taking a little longer. But their support is dwindling fast. That concerned Miranda. She knew full well that the elusive man would do everything he could to ensure the Akatsuki would continue. That meant he would get rid of what he considered loose ends. She chose not to think about it. I heard you got a call last night. It was the Alliance, Ruko said. They want me for something. She glanced over and saw the look on her lover. They don't want me to fight. They want me to teach. She was still surprised, and the call was last night. Miranda was just as surprised. Really? Normally she would have snapped at that question. But Ruko knew she was genuine. I can't fucking believe it either. What the fuck are these people thinking, wanting me to teach? They've gotta be crazy. That could be one reason. She saw another. Or maybe they realize that you are a powerful biotic, and could teach the next generation what you know. The more she thought about it, the more she thought it would be good for Ruko. A position within the Alliance would keep her protected, safe. Have you said yes yet? They want to test me out first, see if I could do it. Her usual confidence, bordering on cockiness, was sounded a little uncertain. She was still trying to wrap her head around the idea of her teaching kids. It was interesting but also scary. Could she do it? She looked over at Miranda again and was struck by just how much she loved her. It was almost amazing how they went from hating each other simply on principle to lovers on a tropical paradise. She wouldn't have believed it if she had been told when she joined the Normandy. Now, she was glad for it. As the orange morphed into blue, she leaned over and kissed Miranda, long and passionate. She kissed back. Was wondering when we'd get to here, she remarked once the kiss was done. Ruko smirked. They had pretty done it everywhere in the house and in the water. They hadn't done it on the beach yet. Miranda, we both know that you're not wearing anything under that sarong. Miranda's answer was to untie the knot at her neck. Ruko had been right. Plus, it made for a decent blanket. Naruto was in an antique store, but he couldn't find what he was looking for. He frowned at the glass shelf, seeing everything else but the thing that he needed. How hard is it to find a VCR? He asked. Well, given how it's been roughly 2,000 years since they've been in operation, Kurama began. It was a rhetorical question, Fox. So, said the shop's owner, standing on the other side of the shelf, have we found we wanted? He had seen the blonde go through the entirety of the store with a deepening look of anger. It made him nervous since he knew who the blonde was. Something like this could break his store, literally too. Naruto stood back up and looked at the man. He was a mousy-looking kind of guy with large glasses over his eyes. Those eyes were nervous and his hands kept tapping against his leg. No, Naruto told him. I didn't. Oh, perhaps you could tell me what you are looking for? I might be able to direct to what you're looking for. I've searched this entire place, and I've not found a single VCR. Frustration leaked out with each word. Naruto, don't take your frustration out on him, Matatabi said. I'm not going to. It looks like it from here. I'm sorry, my lord, the owner told him. But it's rare to find a working VCR nowadays. Most people considered it to be a relic that belongs in a museum. Why am I not surprised? Asked Shikaku. Shut up, Naruto told the tanuki. He wasn't in the mood. Do you know anyone who does have a working VCR? He asked the owner. He shook his head. I'm afraid not, my lord. Damn it. This was going to be a pain in the ass. He turned for the door. There were other places he would have to look at, but he was getting down to the bottom of the list. My lord? Called out the owner. His fingers barely touched the doorknob when he looked back. What? The guy looked nervous but said, May I ask why it is you're looking for a functional VCR? Not a word, the blonde told his tenants. Naturally, they were confused. What do you mean by that? Asked Saiken. I don't need a sarcastic comment from one of you. Okay, first off, started Kurama, tails lashing with agitation. That's just rude. We don't always respond to a scenario with sarcasm. Could have fooled me, he remarked. Second off, who the hell do you think we are? Shikaku? The fox continued. Hey! Protested Shikaku. He was ignored. Don't take your bad attitude out on us, Naruto. We didn't do anything to piss you off, at least this time. He had a point. Naruto was taking his irritation out on them when they hadn't done anything to deserve it. The owner also didn't deserve to get on the receiving end of his temper. So the blonde did his best to rein in his temper. Sorry, he told the Biju. Thank you? Now, answer the man's question. He looked at the owner. I found a collection of videotapes left for me. I've been trying to find a VCR so I can watch them. I see. He thought hard for a moment, and then brightened up with the light of an idea in his eyes. Sir, I think I have a solution for you. He folded his arms and looked at the guy. How so? I might not be able to get my hands on a VCR, but I do know there is a way to digitize tapes. Go on. You could get those tapes digitized and be transferred into OSDs. You do that and you could watch those tapes on your Omni tool. That was something he could work with. Wouldn't I be missing something if I did it this way? He wondered. Thinking back to watching videos on a VCR and watching something on an Omni tool, he knew there were differences. The Omni tool had a clearer image and better sound quality, but there was something he missed about watching a videotape. He pushed past the question. Can you do this process? He asked the owner. Not me, he said. But I do know someone who can. He's a friend of mine, Hank. He's got a hobby of taking old videos and digitizing them for modern appliances. All right, where is this Hank? He grimaced uncomfortably. Unfortunately, he got married recently and is on his honeymoon. Where did he and his new wife go? His husband, actually, the owner corrected him. The blonde gave him a look and he quickly continued on. I don't know where they went exactly, but Hank did say they'd be back in a week or so. From when they left? Asked Naruto. No, my lord, he said, from today. Isn't that just perfect, he groused to himself. Relax, Gyuki told him. You can wait a week. It's not going to kill you. The Hachibi might have been right, but it still bugged him. Well, there was nothing he could do about it. Please let me know when your friend gets back, he said, turning back for the door. Of course, my lord, the owner said to him. And stop calling me a lord, he added as he walked through the door, back out onto the streets. Sheesh, why do people keep insisting on calling me that? If you honestly expect one of us to answer that question, I've just lost all respect for you, Kurama told him. He glared inwardly. I wasn't. Good. It's hard working up respect for you. He looked down the street, trying to figure out what to do next. People walked down without care in the world. He liked it since they weren't usually gawking at him. He looked down the left. That led back to the military compound. He didn't feel like going back there just yet. There was only so much training one could do in the day. He chuckled at that. If my 12-year-old self heard that, he would have asked me if I was stupid to not train. True, very true, agreed the fox. So, what are you going to do? His stomach rumbled. It wasn't loud enough to make the entire street look at him, just loud enough for him alone to hear it. Guess I'm going to lunch. Would that be lunch back in the cafeteria? Gyuki asked him. You probably have another audience waiting for you. I'll pass on that. That was something he needed to do in small doses. If he did it every day, he was certain that they would overwhelm. Kurama chuckled at that. If your 12-year-old self heard you say that, he would kick you in the leg for ignoring all that attention. He could almost kick too. He didn't know what I know. During the war, having all that attention on him, people looking at him and the others with hope they would end the war, it started to feel like a weight on his shoulders. So, what are you going to eat? Isabu asked him curiously. He shrugged his shoulders as he pulled the map out of his back pocket. Don't know yet, he remarked as he unfolded the map and looked at it. He had gotten a few odd looks when he asked for an actual map of the island. Everyone had expected him to download the map on his Omni tool. He just felt some things should remain old school, like maps of cities. I'll probably just wander down the street until I smell something good and go there. He turned to the right and just started walking. The further he got away from the compound, the more he recognized something. The people around him were getting younger and looking more like they were civilians. The styles of clothing also changed, becoming more varied and even colorful. Weird to see the youngsters look so relaxed, he thought as he kept walking. If he hadn't been in the marine compound, he would have thought this kind of area of the city was the city in general. I wonder where I've walked to. I've got a better question, asked Komiai. Why are you calling them youngsters when you're practically the same age? He knew that technically that was true, since he was physically in his mid to late 20s. But it was more than that. He looked at the people around, and saw that they had a good life for themselves. They hadn't fought in any wars, hunt down renegade criminals, or organize a con that took 2 years to build and execute. Hell, he would bet money that their biggest concern was making sure they got to school or work on time, not making sure that they had food for the next day. Is this how veterans feel amongst civilians? If that was so, a lot of the older shinobi from his childhood made a lot more sense. He came to stop when something good hit his nostrils. He took a moment to take another sniff. It was a melody of flavors, all blended together so he couldn't figure out just one of them. He followed the smell with his eyes. It came from the other side of the street, from a little cafe. It was as good a place as any to stop for food. He crossed the street and entered, the door jingling as he went. The first thing he noticed was there seemed to be as many sofas as there were actual chairs and tables, all filled with the same kids he saw outside. They all looked at him with curious eyes, wondering who he was. Some of those eyes started to roam, looking all over his body. Some giggled and some gave inviting grins. Not all of them were women. And once again, Naruto the stud muffin strikes the hearts of the ladies, Sun said with a dry humor. You forgot the men, Koko added. Of course I did. Thanks for catching that. Naruto ignored them as he usually did. He did a quick scan of the room. There was an empty chair and table by the window, the light shining down on the old metal that was the table. He made his way over to that table and sat down. There wasn't any kind of menu on the table, just the salt and pepper. Guess I'll have to wait. He settled for leaning in his chair and looking out the window. People still walked down the streets, carefree and happy about their lives. He heard the feet coming his way before he even turned his head to look. The waitress was a petite thing with messy brown hair and green eyes that seemed just a little too big for her face. But her smile made that fact seem less so. Hi there, she said to him. She didn't have an actual uniform on, just an apron over clothes. He gave her a nod of acknowledgement. Good day. She blushed at that. Why is she doing that? Did you hear yourself? Shikaka asked him. You just gave her the charming voice. She fought down the blush, trying to remain professional. What can I get you? She asked, squeaking the first syllable. Well, first off, may I know your name? The blush threatened to come again. My name? She repeated. People were whispering in the room. They were listening. Yes. I would like to know your name. It would be better than saying, Hey you, all the time, right? She laughed a little at that. Right, of course, she agreed. So, your name? He asked her. Oh, it's Yuki. He smiled. It's a good name. The thank you, she stuttered out. She probably didn't get a lot of compliments about her name. She cleared her throat and said, So, what can I get you? I've never been in here before. What would you recommend? It was always a safe bet to ask what the waitress would recommend. A person would get decent food that way, provided that person didn't piss of the waitress. Otherwise, he would end up with a crappy meal, and no one to blame but himself. Well, our damned sub is good. Damned sub? He asked. He had to hear the explanation for this. It's a meal that comes from the damned lands, she explained. You take a loaf of bread, open it sideways, stuff in 3 different kinds of meat, add some cheese, toast it so it's nice and hot, put on lettuce, red onions, and then top it off with some salt and pepper. You change some of the ingredients to make it your own. What would be the meats? Again, those are interchangeable. What we serve for them are jerky, some small cuts of pork, all on top of a chicken breast. That sounds delicious. I'll have that. She quickly fished out a pen and paper, something that surprised and amused him. Some things never changed. Okay then, she said, writing down the order. You'll have it as I described it? Yes. Do you have a cheese preference? No, not really, he said. You go with what you think is best. But please add the cheese after it's been toasted. He was never a fan of melted cheese. All right, anything to drink? She asked him. Water, please. She walked away, going back to behind the counter. As soon as she got back there, she started talking to the others. That was nothing new, not even the giggling. He ignored it and relaxed in his chair. Hey, Naruto? Said Isabu. I know, he replied. Know what? I know that everyone is looking at me. He could see the eyes looking at him. They were trying to understand what he was. He didn't look at them specifically but rather in general. Kurama saw something else. They're doing more than that. They are eyeballing you like you're the last piece of prime meat on the market. Why is it your euphemisms regarding my sex life always involve meat? He asked the fox, ignoring what he had said. He was well aware of how the people in the cafe were looking at him. He chose to ignore it. If it works, it works. They do enjoy what they see, Koko said, seeing how they were all looking at him. Komi, I noticed something too. Some of them are guys. Naruto noticed that too. He ignored it just like he ignored the rest of it. He was used to being eyeballed by both sexes. He had become aware of it after that little incident with his medical checkup. And? He asked. Just pointing it out, the Kabutomushi told him. You know what you should do? Shikaka asked. No, but I have a feeling that you're going to tell me anyway. You're good. Sweep your eyes over this place. Why would I do that? So you can actually look at them all. It'll be an interesting reaction. You've got nothing else to do, Saiken reminded him. That sandwich is going to take some time getting to the table. The sad thing was he was interested too. He started at one end and looked down the other end. Each girl he looked at blushed and looked away, giggling with each other. Some tried to return his look, but he didn't stay on them. The men who looked did the same, but he treated them the same. When he was done, there were a lot of people eyeballing him back. Some of them even looked angry. One guy, clearly have worked out with his muscles straining his shirt, got up and walked over to him. Naruto saw him coming and didn't react until he was standing right beside him. Yes? He asked casually. We got a problem, buddy, the guy said. There was a harsh scowl on his face that made him seem angrier. His brown hair was slicked back. He probably thought he looked cooler with it like that. You going to kick his ass? Son asked Naruto. No, I'm not going to do that. Pity, he remarked. What are you going to do? Isabu asked. He was going to play along for a little. He kept his relaxed position on his chair and looked up at the guy. We do? He asked. Damn right we do. He pretended to be confused. How's that? The guy glared even harder. You're making eyes at my girlfriend. I don't like it. He looked past him at the table he came from. The girl sitting there winked suggestively, and gave him a not-so-innocent smile. She was one of the ones who looked back. She's making eyes too, he remarked. The guy actually growled at him for that. His eyes raked him with a searching look and his lip curled up in a sneer. You must really be trying hard if you're dressing up like Naruto Uzumaki. It's pathetic. Oh, this is just too rich, Kurama said with a dry chuckle. He doesn't know. Shikaka laughed his head off. He doesn't know you're the real deal. Ah ha 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 ha. Naruto looked calmly up at the man and said, My friend, you need to loosen up. What did you say? You heard me. You need to loosen up. Geez, look at him, Komiai remarked. If his face gets any redder, there's going to be actual steam rising off his head. Isabu came up with an idea for that. You could cook something off his head if he did that. Naruto ignored that and kept looking at the man standing over him. Yes, I was making eyes at your girlfriend. Anger burned bright in his eyes. He raised a hand, ready to punch the blonde. You! Put that hand down before I break it and make you regret coming over here, he ordered, his voice going from casual to colder than Noveria. The guy dropped his hand instantly because on a basic level, he knew that the blonde could back up his words. Thank you, he said, losing the coldness. Now, like I was saying, I was making eyes at your girlfriend, which she did back. I was also making eyes at everyone here. Nothing was meant by it. What do you mean by that? Just what I said, nothing was meant by it. People make eyes at other people all the time. Nothing is meant when it happens. I would even bet money that you've done it too. The man actually outraged that he would say such a thing. I have not. Really? Asked Naruto rhetorically. You've not once seen a beautiful woman walk past and you've stopped to watch her? The outrage drained fast from his face, replaced with shame. That's what I thought. Did this guy really think he was different from all the others? He leaned in close and said, You do it, but you still love your girlfriend, right? Yes, the guy said quietly, almost sounding like a kid waiting to be lectured. What makes you think that she's not the same, checking out handsome men as they go by? He asked. He waited for the confusion and unsureness to hit. When he saw on the guy's face, he continued, It's called appreciating the landscape. You can admire it, but that doesn't mean you have to own it. I can understand you wanting to protect your girlfriend, but you don't need to be so tightly wound up about it. The guy didn't say anything to that. He turned around and walked away. If he had a tail, it would have been between his legs. Gaki, you have to get one last shot in, Kurama said. He insulted you and you need to correct him. Naruto knew by the tone in the fox's voice he wasn't going to let it go. He looked at the guy again and said, One more thing. The guy looked back with a sullen look. What makes you think that I'm dressing up? The sullenness was quickly replaced by puzzlement, then realization, before finally stopping at shocked understanding. Naruto could have laughed at the transition of obvious emotions. It reminded him of the first he was on Omega, and he sent hardened merc groups running with a couple of questions. You? The guy dared to ask, sounding like he couldn't believe it. Naruto nodded once. Me. All the color drained out of his face. Forgive me, my lord, he said, his back becoming straighter. I didn't know. I'm aware. The guy slunk away, but all eyes were on Naruto now. They were just as surprised and shocked. They're all looking at you, Kurama told his Jinchuriki, practically singing it out to him. I can see that, he said back. He looked back at them all and said, Yes, I am Naruto Uzumaki. And 3, 2, 1. Shikaka counted down. As soon as he ended, the whispering began. Naruto Uzumaki? It can't be. You think it's him? Maybe? What do you mean, maybe? I don't know. I've only seen him in the history books. I don't think he's kidding. Do we tell people? No, don't do that. If people heard, this place is going to get swarmed. We don't want to make him uncomfortable. They make me sound like a pet or an experiment, Naruto thought to himself at that last remark. Son was unsympathetic. You're the one who told them who you were. Hang on, Komiai said. We've got someone coming over. Their Jinchuriki looked up at the kid standing at his table. He was different from the first guy, being about 3 years younger and about 40 pounds of muscle lighter. He looked so nervous that he was practically shaking in place. If he wets himself, I won't be surprised, Shikaka declared. Hush, you, the blonde told the Tanuki. Yes? He asked the kid. Can I help you? Are you really Naruto Uzumaki? He asked, his voice showing how nervous he was. He nodded. Yes, I am. You are? Oh, Matt, he answered quickly. I'm Matt. But you already know that. Yes, I do. Again, can I help you? Well, I'm not sure. It might be beneath you. I mean, you're you. He looked at the kid. He did not rebuke but asked a gentle question. How can I know if it's beneath me when I don't know what it is? The kid didn't answer, instead looking more embarrassed. Gaki, people are staring, Kurama told him. He saw the eyes. They were watching, wanting to see what he would do or say. Sit down, he told the kid, who did as he was told. Why don't you tell me what you need help with? Matt gulped, doing his best not to panic. It was hard, considering who it was he was talking to right now. Well, you see, I'm a drama major at the university. My professor gave us a challenge. See if we can find any way to improve upon the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War. The winner will have their improvements recommended to Konoha's theater district, where they'll be performing it. Not only that, but we'd be able to attend the play and meet the cast afterwards. Naruto could see where the kid was going with this. And you thought that since I was there, I could give you an edge over the others? He nodded hesitantly. Yes. So, can you help me? It would depend. On what? He asked, scared of the answer. And he's back to wetting himself, Saiken declared. He mentally rolled his eyes at the slug. You're not being helpful. I know. I tell the truth. He looked at Matt. Do you have a copy of the play on hand? He asked. The kid nodded quickly. I do. He started digging through the pack by his chair. It took him a few seconds, but he pulled out a book and held it out for Naruto to take it. He did and looked at the book. It was a paperback that had little, if any, artwork to it. Perhaps the title was supposed to be all that was needed. Yuki came back with a plate and a cup. Here you go, she told him, placing the food on the table. The sub was long and stuffed with food. It made him hungry just looking at it. Thank you? He fished around in his pocket and pulled out a few credits. Here, he told her, placing them in her hand. She looked at them with honest surprise. Just by looking at the amount, she knew that he had tipped her rather generously, more than she had ever expected. Thank you, my lord, she told him. He winced. Please don't do that. Do what? Call me a lord. I'm no one special. That's bullshit, and you know it, Kurama rebuked. He ignored it. Yuki was confused and worried. I don't think that I would be able to do that, my lord, she said. How could she? She was talking to a living legend. That was something that required the proper respect. But he shook his head. I'm just a regular guy. There's nothing special about me. Matatabi saw that this was something that could go a lot longer than it should. Naruto, just thank the waitress and focus on the book. The Nibi was right. Thank you for the meal, he told the waitress. She took it as the polite dismissal it was and left. He turned his attention back to the book. As he was about to open it, he heard a pen being slid in his way. He looked at the pen, then at Matt. What's that for? For any changes you want to make. Let me read it first. Right, of course, sorry. He opened the book and took a bite out of the sub. Just like the waitress had said, it was nice and hot, adding to the flavor there. The mixture of meat, cheese, and vegetable tasted good on his tongue. If he had fed this to Choji, he was sure the Akimichi would approve. I could get used to eating this. If this replaces ramen, you and I are going to have issues, Kurama told him. You are going to have an issue with me liking a particular food? Fox, I didn't know you cared so much. I don't. What I do care is what you want to eat all the time. I already lived through the ramen. I am not doing another one. Gyuki looked him in the eye, swatting him with his tails for good measure. You're overreacting. Naruto spent the next 20 minutes flipping through the play, reading it in silence. The only sounds he made were from his eating and his drinking. The kid on the other side of the table looked absolutely nerve-wracked while he waited. It was all he could do to not ask a single question. When the blonde finished the book, he finally asked, So? Naruto held up a finger, taking another bite out of his sub as he put the book down on the table. It followed down with some water. Thane wasn't kidding when he said this thing had some artistic flair, he remarked. Matt frowned in confusion. Thane? He said. It sounded like a name, but he didn't know the name it belonged to. Someone I know, he explained. Oh, okay. He waited for a moment, unsure of what to say next. The silence grew and grew until he couldn't take it anymore. Do you have suggestions for improvements? No, Naruto answered him right away. I don't see any place that looks like it needs to be changed or improved upon. This Watanabe guy did his research well. After going through the play itself, he was interested in seeing it live. Matt all but deflated at those words. Oh, I see, he said with a defeated tone. He had worked up his courage, convinced him to walk over, to find help in this living legend, and he said that there was nothing that needed work. This was just too embarrassing. He reached for the book. I'm sorry for wasting your time like this. Naruto eyed him. What are you doing? The kid froze in place. Did he do something wrong? I'm leaving? He cursed himself. Why did he make it sound like a question? Why? Why is that? I wasted your time in coming over. The legend looked at him with an expression of amusement. Did I say you did? Sit down, Matt. Sit down, he repeated a little more firmly. He did, quickly. You said that there wasn't anything to do. No, I said there wasn't anything that needed to be changed or improved upon. Exactly, he said. You're not listening, Matt. What didn't I say? He's not a shinobi, Naruto, Gyuki told him. He's not even a military person. He's not going to be fishing for hidden meanings. Gyuki's right, Saiken agreed. Just look at the kid. He's got no clue about what you're saying. Naruto did look at Matt. He did look utterly confused. The blonde knew then that he was going to have to dumb it down. It was really different dealing with civilians than other military people. I didn't say anything about something being added. Matt's eyes filled with confusion. They traversed through uncertainty to reach realization. You mean something new entirely? He asked. He nodded. Yes, I do. He got excited, but it quickly vanished. I don't know. That might not be something my professor will approve. Did he say it was forbidden exactly? He thought about it, going back through his memory. He shook his head. No, he didn't say that. Then we have a loophole. Matt felt his hope rising at that proclamation. Something like this could really help him. Plus, having Naruto Uzumaki giving him this would make it gold. Thinking about the blonde's help made him pause. There would probably be people who would think he was lying about where he got his information. He would need proof. But how would he get it? As soon as he asked himself that question, he kicked himself. Of course, there was a way to get the proof. He reached for his Omni tool. Do you mind if I record this? He asked as he went through the functions. Naruto looked at him with a puzzled look. Record? He repeated. Yeah, record. Do you mind? It wasn't that he minded, nor was because he was a narcissist. There was just a matter of making sure that video went public or not. It was an open secret that he was on Semper Vigilavi, but only on Earth. If that video got out, everyone in the galaxy could know where he was, including both the tribe and Akatsuki. You're just going to show that to your professor, right? He asked. Matt looked at him. Yes, he said, not understanding what he was worrying about. Kurama saw what was troubling his Jinchuriki. Relax, Gaki, he said. The kid is not going to rat you out. He knew that, he did. The fox was right. He mentally calmed himself and told Matt, sure, I don't have a problem with it. Thanks, the kid said, turning his attention back to the Omni tool. A few seconds later he pulled his fingers away and pointed the Omni tool at him. Could you please state your name for the record? Naruto Uzumaki, he answered. Could you also please explain the reason for this video recording? A part of him wanted to protest. They already knew why he was doing this. It was to help out a kid. But the recording did not know. He would have to repeat himself for that benefit. Of course, he agreed. This is being recorded as evidence to prove that I did help the recorder, Matt, in his work. He has asked me for help in seeking to improve upon the play The End of the Fourth Shinobi World War by Joshiro Watanabe. I have looked over the play and found that it does need any improvement, or changes. I have seen none, but I have also seen that something itself can be added. What do you mean added? I mean to add an entirely new scene. Matt felt excitement course through him at that thought. This was turning out to be a lot better than he thought it would be. Where would this new scene be placed at? He asked, doing his best to keep a level voice and a professional tone. At the end of Act V, when all others are preparing to go after me, the blonde said. He found it a little weird to be talking about himself in the third person, but it wasn't the first time it has happened. I would add a scene where it is just me and the QB. My lord, I would point out that there has never been a part for the QB before. And I'm very offended by it, Kurama said with a huff. I'm a part of this play. Why don't I get a part in it? I'm in it too, alongside B, Gyuki told the fox. Do you hear me complaining? You were a bit piece, in a single act. That was it. Guys, stay on topic, please, Naruto told them both. We are on topic. We're talking about why we're not in this play. And I'm talking about the play itself. Now, if you can't stay on the topic I'm talking about, hush up. He focused back on Matt. If that's the case, they should have a challenge in finding out how to portray the Kyuubi on the stage. You wouldn't recommend an actor portray the Biju? Only if all other ideas wouldn't work, but until that time, I would say no. I do not see how it would work. Matt took a mental note of that. It could hold some weight. What is this scene you suggest? He asked, making sure that he stayed on point. It would be a scene of my last night before the battle with the Beto. I sat at a fire by a stream in the woods. There, we had one last talk. Flashback, Naruto, the fox said, sounding very serious. The blonde paused in eating the fish he had cooked. What's up? He asked. Are you ready for what's going to happen tomorrow? He frowned and put down the fish. Well, there goes my appetite. And he had spent a good half-hour fishing. Gaki, be serious. His frown became more completive as he looked at the fire. I'm serious. Are you? You know I am. I wouldn't have stayed that long in my apartment if I wasn't. The fox agreed with the idea. He had often yelled at the blonde to get out of the house whenever he wasn't sent on a mission. But now, it was different. You're going to be fighting a Beto tomorrow. That's if I find him. He scoffed. Do you really think that he's going to hide away from you? You're the last piece he needs and you're going to be walking towards him. You're going to find him. You're right, he admitted. Really, what was he thinking? He would find a Beto tomorrow. You still think this is a good idea? That, he didn't have any doubt about. It's the only idea we have left. I'm not going to let anyone else die, not when I have the chance to end it this way. The fox twitched his tails as he settled in. All 5 of the Kages rejected this idea when you told them it. They don't want to see you die. Do you want to see me die? Naruto asked him. That's a stupid question, Gaki. You know damn well that if you die, so do I. That's not what I meant, Fox. Put that issue aside. If I do die tomorrow, would you miss me? The two of them had a checkered past, to say the least. But he would like to think they had put their differences aside and worked well together. He considered them both to be friends. He just wanted to know if it was reciprocated. You're a pain in the ass, Naruto, not to mention unbelievably stubborn on the most basic things, the fox finally said. But you're also a good friend, something that I haven't been able to admit in a long time. I would be sad to see you die. He smiled. Thanks for that, Kurama. He meant each word he said. He looked around his small camp. The stream burbled along, feeding its way through the woods around him. If he closed his eyes and listened, he could hear the sound of the woods come alive. The light from the fire played with the shadows against the trees, having them dance in a fickle manner. I love this place, he declared. You mean these woods? They're the same as all the others. The two of them had been in a lot of woods together. The shinobi shook his head. I'm not talking about these woods themselves. I'm talking about all of it. The woods, the rivers, the plains, the mountains, the countries, everything about this land we live in. I love it all. The fire was dying. He fed it another log. The flames rose a bit higher, a bit stronger. I don't want to see it all destroyed, not if I can help it. If I have to sacrifice myself to do it, I will. You're doing as much with what you're planning. It was true, but there was no other option. I have to seal myself away, Kurama. It's the only safe way to deal with the Jubi. There was a small spark of hope that he hung to. Besides, I know that once I'm victorious, I'll come back down. That's the question that should be bothering you. Just how long do you think you'll be up there? 5 years? 10? 50? 100? Do you know how long you will be orbiting the Earth? For all you know, all your friends could be dead by the time you come back down. Tears threatened to well up in his eyes at the question. He knew that danger was there. There was no accounting for how long the struggle against the Jubi would take. But it was a risk he had to accept. There was no other way. I'm aware of that, Furball. I can just hope that I come back down when they're all alive. So, are you ready to fight a Beto? He shook his head. No, but I am prepared. Good, you're learning. End flashback. And that's what happened, Naruto finished. Matt stared at him with wide eyes of wonder. Did that truly happen? He asked. None of that was an embellishment? It happened as I remembered it. Now that he thought about it, it did sound a little bit like a speech. Perhaps Thane had been onto something when they were talking about it. Thank you for that, my lord, the kid said. I will have to write this out and ensure that it is written in the proper form, but I do think that we have something here. Happy to help, he said back. Matt turned off the recorder and left. He turned back to his food and quickly ate the rest of it. His Omni tool came on as he was finishing up. What the? I think there's a message for you, Sun remarked. The email icon was glowing. He opened it. There was a message from General Ramos. Lord Naruto. Report to my office ASAP. Well, that's odd, he thought to himself, closing the Omni tool. What does he want from me? Did you piss him off lately? Matatabi asked him. Not that I'm aware of. He got out of his chair and walked up to the register. The waitresses behind the counter started fighting amongst themselves to try and reach the register first. Shikaku watched the little fight with an amused expression. Isn't that cute? He said. Yes, you have women fighting over again, Naruto, Komi agreed. Way to go. You know, Kurama remarked, this actually reminds me of the wet t-shirt contest. At that, Naruto shuddered. We're not talking about that. He waited for someone to finally come up to the register. The fighting stopped and a waitress with short blonde hair came to him. How much do I owe you? He asked. For the meal, about 27 credits, she told him, her voice trying to be a husky whisper. For me, all I'd need is a night on the town. Alice! One of the other waitresses snapped at her. She ignored it. He ignored the offer and paid up. Thanks for the meal, he said, turning for the door. It was delicious. Naruto walked into the general's office and found Sarah at her desk. Hey there, Sarah, he said, walking over to her. She looked at him and smiled. Hello, Lord Naruto. Should I wait? No need, General Ramos is expecting you. All right, thanks. He eyed the pictures on the desk. There was a new one, of her husband, and a woman with blonde hair he assumed was Megan. He gave her a knowing look and she blushed slightly at it. You're welcome, by the way. And I thank you for it, my lord, she told him. He gave her one last smile as he walked through the door. Hey there, General, he greeted the man at the desk. Lord Naruto, replied Ramos. He stood easy before the desk. You said that you wanted to see me. I do. Please sit. When the blonde sat down, he began. There are two matters that I've asked you for, Commander. I will deal with the lighter topic, so to speak. The way he said it had Naruto wondering what the heavier topic was going to be. Alright, what's up? Apparently, word about your little visit to the Niners has gotten out. He grimaced. Ah crap, which one found me? The Akatsuki? He asked the tribe. Neither, actually. I've been assured that all attempts to keep you hidden from both groups are still in effect. Oh, phew, he breathed out. You had me worried there for a second, General. If either group had found out where he was exactly on Earth, he didn't want to think about what that could have meant. My apologies, Ramos told him. Actually, a company has managed to reach me about you, a film-making company. These the guys who are making the Shinobi show? Shinji did say that he could get in touch with those guys. He shook his head. No, this isn't them. This is a company that makes more documentaries. They are making a documentary about the Fourth Shinobi World War and the events leading up to it. There are probably hundreds of those by now. He didn't really know since he had never really watched documentaries outside of school. Perhaps, but this one has a unique opportunity. It didn't take a genius to figure out what he meant by that. Me? You, my lord, he said with a nod. Looks like you're getting on the screen after all, Naruto, Koko told him. It's just not the big screen. He was always aiming for the small screen, Isabu pointed out. Not once did any of the offers given to him include an actual movie. He had to object to that. The way Isabu made it sound, he was actually going after movie offers. I don't go around looking for movie offers, Isabu. Okay, fair point. Do you have an actual plan for me? He asked General Ramos. Or are they hoping you'll say yes and go from there? They do have an actual plan for you. These are not amateurs, my lord. They know what they are doing. He leaned back into his chair. So, what is it they want from me? Initially, they will want to do a few interviews. If things go well and they get permission, they would like to take you over the elemental countries so you can give, I guess you can say, tours of battlegrounds. So they'll need your permission to get me off this island. It's not just me, Lord Naruto. Hackett, Anderson, and Councilor Udina have to be notified and give their approval of it. But you're the last stop, he pointed out. It's your choice whether I'm staying on this island or not when the time comes. You are my babysitter, after all. The general didn't glare heavily at him, but there was enough of a glare there. Poor choice of words there, he said. Really poor, Shikaka said. Son nodded. Like you're about to go broke poor. Yes, thank you. I realize that, he told the both of them. Just making sure, Shikaka replied in a sing-song voice. Regardless, Ramos said, ignoring the comment, I am not the only one who is involved in this. As a matter of fact, you are involved in this too, my lord. Now that was surprising to the blonde. Really? He asked. I would have thought that you'd ignore what I want and say yes or no. He got a dry look. We're not barbarians, my lord. Right, you're not. If anything, his time was probably considered barbaric. He'd take offense at that, but it would still be true. So, what's going to happen? Do you want to do this? Sure, he answered without a single pause. It sounds like it could be interesting. Plus, it would help me see what the elemental countries have turned into. Gaki, how many times have I told you not to rush right into things? Kurama asked. Never, since you've never done that, he replied. Not true, Matatabi objected. He's done it a few times. And if that doesn't help, here it is again. Don't rush into things, the fox told him. He could see that there were things that needed to be checked, so he didn't argue the point. I would have to look over what they're planning to ask me, he said to the general. Just to make sure that I don't get angry enough to punch their lights out. That will be fine, he agreed. It would probably also be best if you didn't flash them with the Oiroke no Jutsu. He couldn't help but chuckle at that. You've got a point there. Were you planning to flash them? Isabu asked him. No. That had just been a tactic to get that one reporter on the Citadel off his back before he punched her. I would like to look over where they are planning to take me, see if I must make any adjustments. I've been told that they've been very accurate in where they want to take you, my lord. That may be. I don't want to doubt them, but there's a difference in being accurate and being there. Naruto? Said Saiken. What? Doesn't that sound a little offensive? He's right, Gyuki said. You should change it. Alright, I'm going. Really, what did you do when we weren't around? Shikaka asked him. He mentally glared at the tanuki. I wasn't wondering if I should commit suicide to shut up the voice in my head. He's right, Kurama agreed. He usually just argued with the one already in there. Naruto ignored the fox and kept his attention on the general. If they're worried about how that might sound, I can assure them it would only be suggestions and not outright demands. I'm sure that can be acceptable, Commander. So you accept? He nodded. I do. Hopefully, I'll be able to give them that tour they want. The general nodded but became grim and serious. Now we must turn to the other matter. He reached for the intercom button on his desk. Sarah? Yes, General? His secretary asked. Send him in. Of course. Send who in? Naruto wondered. He got his answer when the door opened. He turned out of the chair and faced the door. A Marine walked in, a neutral look on his face. His skin had a dark olive complexion, which told Naruto that he was from the Great Jungle. His hair was shorn to the grain on his head sides but was left in a mohawk style on top. There was a tattoo on his neck peeking out of his uniform, which was already bulging with muscles that would have made Guy approve. Commander, this is Lieutenant James Vega from the 104th Hellcats Marine Platoon, General Ramos introduced the both of them. He's requested this meeting. Naruto came over to the newcomer and held out his hand. Hey there, nice to meet you, he said with a smile. The newcomer looked at him, looked at his hand, and then at the general. Sir, with your permission? He asked. General Ramos nodded. Go ahead. It is tradition. Tradition? Repeated a puzzled blonde. What are they talking about? He got his answer when the lieutenant slugged him hard in the face. He was surprised by the fist and fell to the ground because of it. He came back ready for a fight, but he didn't attack right away. What the hell? He demanded of the new guy. What did I do to you? The lieutenant did not try to attack. He stayed in his place and looked respectful. I'm sorry, sir, but it is tradition. Tradition? He asked. What kind of tradition requires you to punch a guy? I could name a few, Sun offered. He shut down that fast. Not now. Commander, Lieutenant Vega is a part of the Gato Manchado tribe, General Ramos explained. In the Great Jungle, it is expected of a grieving family to strike the person who led the deceased to their death. A bad feeling was stirring in his stomach. He had a feeling that he knew what was going to be said next. But his mouth was already moving. Deceased? The general nodded. Agent Quan Misley was a part of the Gato Manchado tribe, and she was Lieutenant Vega's sister. Just like he thought, that bad feeling hit him hard. He looked at Lieutenant Vega again, searching for Quan Misley. He found her in the way her brother's nose, cheekbones, and the way he set his face into a serious expression. You're her brother? He asked, unable to help himself. I am, sir, Vega answered. The urge to fight drained out of him faster than he could possibly blink. General Ramos said, Lieutenant Vega has requested that you go to the Great Jungle in order to attend Quan Misley's funeral. As her commanding officer, you have a duty in that funeral. He looked back at the general. The way he talked, the blonde felt as if he was already going. Are you sending me to that funeral? He asked. This is a serious matter, Commander. You are required by jungle tradition to attend the funeral. However, your safety and security still remain a priority. Naruto grasped what he was saying. You're going to send me with an escort, aren't you? The thought had crossed my mind, yes. The same as before, he explained. But the question here is, do you want to attend this funeral? Sir, protested Vega. As you were, Lieutenant, he snapped instantly. This is not your decision. You have put in the request. You have done as tradition asks. That's as far as you go. The rest is up to the commander. What are you going to do, Naruto? Isabu asked. Kurama scoffed. What do you think he's going to do? No, Lieutenant Vega is right, Naruto told the general. I should go. See? Oh, right. General Ramos looked him squarely in the eyes. Are you certain about this, my lord? He asked. He nodded. Quan Misley died on my watch. The least I can do is send her off. If I have to get pummeled in the process, so be it. He just had to wonder how many were in the Gato Manchado tribe. He had a feeling that his body was going to end up being a black and blue tapestry. Very well, you will leave for the Great Jungle on the morning flight. Lieutenant Vega will inform you of your duties on the flight over. That will be all. Vega saluted. Sir, he said shortly. He turned around and walked out of the room. Naruto watched him leave. It kinda reminded him of Quan Misley. They had the same gait. The flight to the Great Jungle could possibly be described as awkward, if Vega, who insisted on being called James, had kept up his cool demeanor outside the general's office. But as soon as Naruto left, he was there and apologized for the punch. He was actually a little bit of a fan, which was a little weird for the blonde. Then he told Naruto about what happened to him on Fel Prime. He believed what the shinobi had said about the Reapers and the Collectors. That eased the tensions between the two of them, being able to find common ground on two places, the return of the Reapers, and Quan Misley. James told Naruto what his duties were for the funeral on the flight over. He listened and heard everything that was said. There was none of his usual humor or sarcasm. He couldn't find any in this situation. The place did not land in Rio but rather flew past it, over the river. He looked out at the city through the window. What he saw amazed him. Wow! What's that, sir? James asked from the other side of the plane. Just taking in the sights, that's all. He smiled with the pride one could only get from growing up there. I think I understand what you mean, sir. Rio de la Vida is one of the most beautiful cities on Earth, if not the entirety of the galaxy. Trust me, I believe it. Looking out at the city built with and through the trees, the multiple bridges at various heights spanning the river, he was awed by it all. I have to wonder if this place was what the Shodaime Hokage wanted Konoha to look like. If he saw this place, he would have shit himself with excitement, Kurama declared with the authority of knowing the guy. Madara probably would have either been impressed too or burn it down, depending what kind of mood he was in. Of course, this isn't the original Rio, James said. Naruto turned to face him. Oh? It's been attacked and destroyed many times through the centuries. More often than not it was due to forest fires. But with destruction comes a new chance of creation. The builders always took the moment to rebuild the city, making it stronger and better. He gestured at his window. What you see out there is the result of that attitude. The blonde could definitely see the results. He also saw that they were flying past the city itself, or at least the downtown part of it. Where are we heading? He asked. The suburbs? I guess you could say that, although I've never heard it put like that before. That's Naruto for you, Gyuki remarked. Thank you, he told the Hachibi. So, your tribe lives in Rio? He asked the Marine. My tribe founded Rio, James declared with the utmost pride. We lived by this river since the beginning. It was our lifeline and that's how it got its name. Our land is in the oldest part of the city. Thinking about the tribe waiting for him reminded him of the punch he got back on the island. James, can I ask you something? Yes, my lord. He winced at that. First off, don't call me that. The Marine was confused. But it's only right to call you that. Why? Well, you're you? He groaned. Is everyone going to use that as an excuse? Most likely, Kurama said. Can't they stop? Nope, get over it. Look, he told James. If you want to be respectful, just call me by my rank. That he could live with. Wimp, muttered the fox. Shut up. James wasn't exactly sure about that. Technically speaking, the blonde was right. He should be addressing him as commander or sir. But he had heard plenty of people call Naruto Uzumaki my lord and he hadn't reacted like he hated it. Maybe it was because he was in public and he knew that trying to convince random groups of people otherwise would be pointless. Even so, the Marine was surprised. Naruto Uzumaki didn't let the praise go to his head. In fact, he acted like he was allergic to it. Well, if he wanted to be addressed like that, James could oblige him. All right, Commander, he said. What is it you want to know? It's about your tribe. Just how many of them are there? Why do you want to know? That was a question he didn't expect to hear. Most people didn't ask about the size of one's tribe because it was rather rude. It shouldn't matter how big one's tribe is. All that should matter is that one belongs to a tribe. It's about that tradition you showed me back in Ramos's office. Oh, that? He hadn't really thought about that. The man did look nervous. Well, don't worry. The kids won't be allowed to do it. That didn't inspire a lot of confidence in him. In fact, it made him wonder just how many kids there were in the tribe. If there are that many kids, how many adults are there? He asked himself. The ship came to a stop. We're here, James declared, standing up from his seat. I didn't even know that we had arrived, Naruto thought to himself. Had he been that consumed by his question he didn't know that they had reached their destination? Matatabi had a different idea. These ships are really impressive, she asked. I never really thought about how fast they can get somewhere, especially when flying through a planet. He never paid any attention to it, Saiken said. Joker was always there to announce whenever the Normandy had arrived somewhere. Naruto stood up and followed James to the hatch. The squad of spears stood up from their seats and followed them both. These weren't the same spears he had gone with to the land of Wave. They were different men. The hatch opened and Naruto and James stepped out. Naruto looked out and was stunned into silence. There were multiple faces staring back at him, all various ages but all clearly a part of the same tribe. The sheer amount of them stretched back farther than he could almost see. Sheesh, said Kurama said. And I thought the Hyuga clan was big. His Jinchuriki wasn't concerned about that. Commander, meet the Gato Manchado tribe, James introduced him. I'm a dead man, he silently cried. He was going to die from all the punches he would get. He didn't want to move but the Marine started walking and he had to follow. The tribe parted for them. He mentally braced himself for the pain he was sure was about to come. But as he walked through the people, not a single person reached out and struck him. He kept waiting for them to hit him but they did nothing of the sort. Why aren't they hitting me? He asked. Gyuki rolled his eyes. I would have thought that you'd be happy that they're not hitting you. Just keep your guard up, Sun suggested. They might be waiting for you to drop it. You're not helping my confidence here. Suck it up, you big baby, Kurama snapped, irritated by his attitude. When did you become a winner? As soon as I came off the ship and saw how many people were here. Just look at these people. They were going to kill him, he just knew it. Oh, Kami, help me. The two of them kept walking through the crowd until they reached the other side. A man stood there, waiting for them. A panther twice his size lounged behind him but watched everything with a keen eye. James went straight to the man. Mi padre, he greeted, slipping into Hispano. Mi hijo, his father said back. Naruto, you have the crystal, right? Komiai asked his Jinchuriki. He scowled at the question. Of course I do. Then why are they speaking in a different language? I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. James turned back. Commander, this is my father, Hector Vega, tribal head. He looked down at the panther. And this is Aldo, the jaguar boss. At his name, the panther rose up, showing himself to be even larger than before. He padded over to Naruto and looked down at him. So, he said in a growling voice, this is one who walked away. To anyone else, that would have not made any kind of sense. But Naruto had a feeling about what he was talking about. You know Gamikichi? He asked. Si, I know that viejo sapo. For how long? He dared to ask. The panther gave him a cool look and said, long enough. It sniffed him. You reek of creatures. Hey, we don't reek! Shikaka protested. Only Kurama reeks. What you say? Kurama demanded. Naruto was more concerned about the more pressing matter. He leaned in close and whispered, You can smell them? I can, Aldo told him. The strongest is Zoro. Huh? He couldn't help but ask. The panther gave him a long look that said just what he thought about his mental capabilities. Fox, he said. I smell fox on you. Well, you would. I also smell gato on you. That is acceptable. Acceptable? Repeated a clearly affronted Matatabi. It was quite rare to feel the Nibi outraged. She was usually one of the level-headed ones. Naruto, step over and let me talk to this guy. He glanced up at the panther. Its green eyes were watching him intently, waiting to see what he would do next. Whatever he was going to do next, he would have to be very, very careful about. He got the feeling that letting Matatabi take over his voice would not be a good idea. No, let's not do that. Naruto, move over. We're not here to cause an incident, Matatabi. Having her trash talk a panther that could easily squash him just by sitting down definitely qualified as causing an incident to him. She actually huffed at him. Fine, she conceded. I'll lay off for now. Aldo looked down at him with an interested look. The Gato is angry. You refuse it. Intriguing, he rumbled. I know when to fight and when not to, Naruto told him with an edge to his voice. The panther gave him a smile that hinted at teeth. Good. It turned around and padded away, obviously satisfied. It left him still standing with James and his father, with all eyes on them. You are tense, Commander, remarked Hector. Why is that? Naruto looked at him. He was at the same height of his son with graying hair and beard. He had less bulk in his arms, but the blonde knew he had strength in him. He could have gone with a lie, but that wouldn't have done him any good. The truth was better. I'm just waiting for the slugfest to happen. A confused Hector looked at him. Slugfest? He asked. Now Naruto was confused. Shouldn't he know about this? It seemed like something he should know. Tell him outright, Kurama told him. And wait it out. It wasn't the best plan, but he didn't see any better ones. Aren't the adults in the tribe supposed to beat me for letting her die? In the presence of these people, her family, he couldn't say Quan Misli's name. It stuck in his throat. Hector gave him one long look and it felt like time slowed down to a crawl. Suddenly he threw back his head and roared in laughter. The entire tribe laughed too. The air filled with their laughter, bouncing around his ears like it was a playground and they were there for fun. He didn't know why they were laughing, but he didn't dare to laugh with them. He stood there, waiting for the laughter to end so he could get a proper response. The laughter died down, and James's father looked at him warmly. I see my son has been putting you on. We no longer follow that tradition. It's been in disuse for well over 4 centuries. He looked accusingly at James. You prank me, Lieutenant. The man stood with his back straight and a grin on his lips. He was proud of what he did. Yes, sir, I did, he said without shame. Naruto grinned back. Then, fair warning, expect retribution. The Marine's grin faded a little at that warning. Good, he knew to be afraid what would come next. Naruto, priorities, son told him sternly. You're here for a funeral, not a pranking war. The Yambi was right. He turned his attention back to Hector, who had become grim and serious again. There is one tradition that we must obey, he said in a voice that all could hear. Commander Naruto Uzumaki, you will tell our tribe how my Maria died. Maria? He couldn't help but ask. He didn't know anyone by that name. Fortunately, James came to his rescue. My sister, sir, he said. You honestly didn't think that Quan Misli was her actual name, did you? Honestly, he was never quite sure about it. He had been sealed away from 2,000 years and he wasn't aware of the great jungle when he was. Names could have changed, become different from what he knew. I never thought to ask, he finally said. James understood. It was why he explained, Quan Misli is the name she chose when she joined the Hunters. But her true name has been and always will be Maria. Tell us, Commander, Hector said, his voice changing to that of a man who wanted closure. Tell us how she died. He could still see it happen, even when he didn't want to. It wasn't intentional, he began. I didn't actively try to send her to her death. I know that sounds like I'm making excuses, but it's the truth. The base we were on was tearing itself apart. We had to get out before we were torn apart with it. Our ship couldn't find a stable spot to land. All it could was hover on the outside with the hatch open. We took turns jumping the gap, reaching the hatch. Maria was the last one before me. She leapt across and I thought she was going to make it. But she was shot in the leg. The momentum made her turn unwillingly. Her head, it collided with the ship's hull. Her neck snapped right there. She died instantly. He hung his head in shame. There was nothing I could do. A hand clasped his shoulder. He looked up and saw Hector standing in front of him. You did do something, he said. You brought her home. For that, we thank you, Naruto Uzumaki. James stepped forward and placed his hand on him too. More hands fell upon him, on his back. He looked around and saw all the tribe reaching out and touching him. Those who could not touched others who were touching him. All together they touched him, laying their hands on him. They were hands of comfort, assurance. A phrase came whispering up through the people. It reached Naruto's ear and stayed there, being repeated over again and again. Ella esta en casa, they said to him. You guys know what that means? He asked his tenants. Kurama gave him a flat look. Does it look like we know Hispano? Right, what was he thinking? Why ask them when there was a better person to ask? He looked to James. What are they saying? He looked solemnly into his eyes. They're saying Ella esta en casa. They are saying she is home. They gave him a room for the night and appropriate clothes for the funeral tomorrow, a black suit. When the morning rose, so did he. He didn't have the stomach for food, but he knew that he had to eat something. His stomach wouldn't forgive him if he skipped a meal, not until he did eat. He ate lightly and waited. He waited for a long time. The funeral was to begin at noon, and until then there was nothing he could do. Time passed in a crawl. He was glad when his door was knocked on. Commander, you decent? Called out James. He stood up from his bed. Yeah, I am. The door opened. The lieutenant was dressed in his military uniform. His rank showed on his shoulders and on the cuffs of his sleeves. It's time. They left the room and began what felt like the long journey down the compound of the tribe. The white stucco walls seemed brighter because of the sun's light. As soon as they stepped into a courtyard, traversing it, he saw that there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. Today promised to be cheery and bright. He didn't know if that should be so. It didn't feel right. But who was he to argue with the weather? They didn't see a person in sight going through the house. He took that to mean they were already waiting for the funeral to begin. His suspicion was proven right when they reached the compound temple. Hector had told him the previous night that their temple was of modest means. Looking at it now, he could only think that meant one thing. He was talking about the size, wasn't he? He asked. Komi looked at the temple too. It was as big as the other buildings in the compound, probably a little bit bigger with all the spires. Yeah, I think he was talking about the size. There is one thing good about this, Sun said. What's that? It looks a hell of a lot better than our own church. Oh, Kami, don't remind me, Kurama said with a groan. I'm still embarrassed for seeing it. Everyone shared that agreement. Just thinking about the enormous church they found in the land of waves made the Biju wish they could forget about it. Do you think we could have this church instead? Saiken asked. This one is tasteful. Naruto agreed. He saw no gold anywhere on the church's outside, just brown stone that looked warm from the sun's light. There was a tower that was higher than the rest, holding a bell in it. The bell rang out a mournful note slowly again and again, letting the note into the air before ringing out once more. Do we go through the front? He asked James, taking his attention away from the church. If they did that, it would take a while. The front of the church was plugged by the number of tribe members still going in. The Marine shook his head. No, you're a part of the ceremony. We'll go around the back. They sidestepped the crowd and went to the back. As they walked down the side of the church, Naruto glanced up at it. The windows were stained glass, and the glass was colored. There was not a single color on each window. There were many colors, and they all painted a picture. He saw one with a priest surrounded by jaguars. Who's that? He asked. That is Alejandro Vega, James answered. Your ancestor? He asked. Shikaku rolled his eyes at that opportunity. No, they just happened to share the same name. All right, there's no need to get that sarcastic. He realized the mistake he made. But the lieutenant didn't comment on that. Yes, he is my ancestor. He was the speaker to the gods during the time of the Loco War, he said. We've always called him the Loco Unificator for that. And what does that mean, Loco Unificator? James didn't miss a beat when he said, the crazy unifier. Naruto actually paused when he heard that. That's harsh, he said. You were called worse back during the war, Kurama reminded him. He glared inwardly at the fox. I know that. You don't have to remind me. Actually, said James, it describes what he did fairly well. He did unite the tribes, but it took a war for it to happen. It also was a war that he helped start, hence the name. Did he fight in the war? He nodded. He did. Even when he could have hidden away from it, he fought in the war. Using the jaguars, I would bet, the blonde thought to himself. Why else would he be surrounded by them? Matatabi growled inside his head. Let's not talk about those overgrown furballs, she declared. I'm still irritated at them. He could feel that, but now he was curious. James, can I ask you something? Sure, Commander, James said back. It's about the jaguars. I find it a bit strange to see it passed down through the family. It's been our way of life, sir. I understand that. Believe me, I do. He would never think lower of them for something as simple as that. I just find it weird. Where I'm from, the summoning was passed down from the teacher to the student. Yes, we've heard of the elemental summons, and how they were passed down. To be honest, we've always found that to be odd too. The blonde laughed a little. Alright, that's fair. So, is it passed down to the first son or something? That used to be the case, until Fernando Vega, El Padre de las Hijas. Huh! Why wasn't he able to hear the translation? This truly was odd. James didn't look at him with irritation at his confusion. The father of daughters, he explained, that Naruto understood. Not a single son, huh? He asked rhetorically. No, and he married 3 different times. Was that allowed? He shook his head. No, his wives kept dying. He paused at the sound of those words and quickly looked back at the blonde. He didn't kill them. Naruto held up his hands in a defensive gesture. I didn't say anything. He couldn't just, not after learning from Jiraiya and learning the man had a big family. Sorry, James told him, meaning it. It's what most people think of Fernando when they learn about him. The truth was that he loved each of his wives. Their deaths were either by natural causes or accidents. In any case, he had nearly 20 daughters but no sons. He had no choice but hand down the Jaguar's contract to his firstborn daughter. She did so well with them that he made the decision to have the contract passed down to the firstborn child, no matter what their gender was. He listened to what the Marine was saying. It sounded like the summons was handed down while the parent was still alive. That meant it had to be handed down at a specific age or time. If he had to guess, it would be when the firstborn became a warrior in their own right. Did you have the Jaguars then? Technically speaking, I'm supposed to. Supposed to? He looked sad as he said, Maria was my older sister, Commander. She was supposed to have the Jaguars, but she had to give them up when she joined the Hunters. Father took them back and held them for her. She was supposed to get them when she left the Hunters. But with her dead. His voice died away and he couldn't say the rest of those words. But Naruto understood what he wasn't saying. You're supposed to inherit them. He nodded. Can we not talk about this? The blonde understood. Of course, he told him. They reached the back of the church. The door was unlocked. They went through a corridor made of the same brown stone as the outside until they came to a door off the left. They walked in, getting the attention of the 4 men already in there. Naruto quickly looked around the room. There was nothing special about it, which meant it could be used for a variety of things. Right now, it was being used as a waiting room. "Hey, look who it is," said the man standing at the back, the little brother. He had a cocky air to him that was supported by confidence. James did not react to that. Instead he asked, "Are you all off duty?" The bald man closest to them nodded. "We are." "Hello, Alexandro, Miguel, Enrico, Pedro." The guy in the back looked at Naruto. "Who's the gringo?" he asked with a small sneer. "Anybody else feel that was an insult?" Naruto asked his tenants. It sounded like an insult to him. "It sounded like an insult," Isabu agreed. "But what does he mean?" Koko asked. Naruto didn't know what it meant. But he didn't ask for the definition. He did that, the man would get smugger. "Miguel," James said with a hard frown. The man smirked. "It's an honest question, Vega. Who's the gringo?" "Miguel," said the third man warningly. His brown hair glistened in the light, showing that it was slicked back. "Come on, Enrico, you're thinking the same thing." "I might be, but I would not use that word." "How about you, Alexandro?" he asked the fourth man, who was sitting down in a chair against the other wall. He looked up from his clasped hands. "It is a foul thing to say, Miguel," he said quietly. "Pedro?" the bald man said. "Perhaps we should know the man's name before we continue?" All eyes fell on James and Naruto. "Of course," agreed the Marine of the two. Naruto intervened there. "Hold on. Before we go any further, somebody mind telling me what a gringo is?" Miguel laughed. "Where the hell have you been living, under a rock?" "And then some," he thought to himself with a dry laugh. "Just tell me." "It's an insulting word for outsider," James told him. "I see." He looked at all 4 of the men in the room. They were dressed just as formally as he was. He could see how they held themselves. It might have looked relaxed, but there were hints of them prepared for any kind of attack. They weren't civilians. And just who are these guys who so boldly insult people? James gave them all one more look. "These are Maria's former teammates, the 666th Hunter Unit." That name rang in his mind. He had heard it before. "The Numero del Diablo Unit," he said, looking at them all. He looked at the blonde with surprise. He shouldn't be. His sister would have introduced herself when first meeting him. "Yes, that's them." Miguel smiled at Naruto. "So you've heard of us?" "Only just," he replied. He looked at the others. "Competent Y Loco, boys." "Competent Y Loco," they replied. Naruto glanced over at James. His question was obvious. "It means competent and crazy, Commander," the Marine explained. "It's their motto. The 666th are called in when a unique approach is needed." Alexandro smiled. "There's no need to be polite about it, James. They call us in whenever there's a situation that only we are crazy enough to deal with." "Suddenly, Quan Misli's joining my team makes a lot more sense," Naruto said to himself. Their eyes snapped to him at that. "What did you say?" Miguel asked him. "I said that her joining my team makes a lot more sense," he repeated himself in the exact same tone of voice. "Guys, this is Naruto Uzumaki," James introduced him. It was funny to watch the cocky look on Miguel's face drain away and be replaced with a shocked look. Naruto Uzumaki?" he repeated. The blonde in question gave him a little wave. "That's me." He came to attention and saluted. "Sir, it's an honor to meet you." The other 3 came to attention and saluted as well. He looked at the 4, surprised by the reaction. "As you were," he told them, trying to make them stop saluting. It was weird to see such a quick change in them. James looked at him and then at the hunters. He chuckled. "I should have thought that would happen." "Huh," said Naruto. "What do you mean by that, James?" "Sir, you're the inspiration for the 666th. They came into formation after the local war, and we heard tales of your exploits." "Sir, I would like to apologize for my insult," Miguel said, sincerity shaping each of his words. Naruto said accepted, but try to watch what you say, huh? Somebody might kill you for it. Enrico grinned. Somebody already did. That's how he ended up joining the hunters. The door on the other side opened and Hector came in. "Boys," he said in a grim voice. "It's time." The good air and humor vanished at those words. They followed the head of the tribe through the door. In the next room, an urn rested on top of a pedestal. It was tall and slender, with 6 handles around its top. Naruto saw it and came to a quick conclusion. Is that? Hector nodded. Yes, that is my daughter. He looked at his son. Have you told him of his duties? I was about to, father, James replied. To Naruto, he said, as her last commander, you will tell us about Maria in your own words. Then, we will help you carry her to the river, but it will be you who will wade into the river to release her back into it. One question, would it be alright if I walked on the water? It is acceptable, Hector told him. Please take a handle. They all did and lifted the urn. It wasn't that heavy. The funeral passed in a strange kind of blur for Naruto. He could hear it and see it all, but it didn't mean anything. He sat in his seat, at the front beside James and Hector. The priest was speaking, but he wasn't listening. All he did was look at the urn, standing in contrast to the white walls with its redness. The hunters stood up, one by one, and looked out to the tribe. They stood by the urn and told them of how Quan Misley was brave, strong, and always there for them, just like they had been there for her when she needed it. When they were done, James stood by the urn. He told them all of a tale from his childhood, his and his sister. Your turn, Kurama told Naruto as the Marine finished his tale. He stood up woodenly and walked up to the urn. He took a moment to look at it. It seemed like a joke, almost. This single urn was the only thing that remained of Quan Misley. It would just take one push or shove and the thing would shatter against the ground. It was sad. But all funerals were sad things. Kami knows he had attended or known of enough to know that truth. He breathed deep and looked at the tribe. I didn't know Maria as well as they did, he said, gesturing to the hunters and James. I didn't even know her name was Maria. To me, she was Quan Misley. She was a stranger to me, but I welcomed her all the same. I made mistakes with her. A small smile came onto his lips. The first was letting her behind the wheel. One drive with her in a Mako, and we all agreed that it would never happen again. It was a terrifying experience. The tribe rumbled with laughter. He was glad they found it funny, but that was going to be the last funny thing he would say. As we worked together on missions, I saw her more and more as a friend. When I thought that I had lost her, I was saddened. But when I found out that she was alive again, instead of being happy, I was enraged. To me, it was like she had left our other teammate to die so she could save her own skin. I didn't forgive her for what she did. I was determined to cast her out without making her leave the ship. I was rude, short with her, treated her like a pariah. She endured it all because she knew something that I didn't. She knew what was really happening, what I had erased from my own memory to keep us both safe. She risked her life in that time to make sure we were successful, while enduring my coldness. She endured it for such a length, I started to warm up to her again. But I still didn't trust her as much as I used to. When I remembered everything, I felt ashamed of how I treated. She didn't deserve my hatred. He looked at the urn again. If she was still alive, I would apologize for all I caused her. Instead, all I can is this: I'm sorry, Quan Misley, and I wish you were still alive. He sat back down and the funeral continued. The priest said a few more words, but he didn't hear them. All 6 of them stood up again and took a handle of the urn. They walked down the center of the church and all eyes were on them. Naruto saw how some of them had painted skulls on their faces. It was odd, but maybe it was their way of mourning. He couldn't judge them. As they walked a slow march, feeling the weight of the urn in their hands, a song began to play. Always you will be part of me, and I will forever feel your strength when I need it most. You're gone now, gone but not forgotten. I can't say this to your face, but I know you here. I'll see you again. You never really left. I feel you walk beside me. I know I'll see you again. When I'm lost, I'm missing you like crazy, and I tell myself I'm so blessed to have had you in my life, my life. I'll see you again. You never really left. I feel you walk beside me. I know I'll see you again. When I had the time to tell you, I never thought I'd live to see the day when the words I should have said would come to haunt me. In my darkest hour I tell myself, I'll see you again. I'll see you again. You never really left. I feel you walk beside me. I know I'll see you again. I'll see you again. You never really left. I feel you walk beside me. I know I'll see you again. I will see you again. I'll see you again. I miss you like crazy. You're gone but not forgotten. I'll never forget you. Someday I'll see you again. I feel you walk beside me. Never leave you, yeah? Gone but not forgotten. I feel you by my side. No, this is not goodbye. Naruto could feel tears in his eyes. His throat started to clutch up. Naruto, are you alright? Aisabu asked him. It's a good song, he declared. He was sure that Quan Misli would approve of it. He believed in what the song promised. One way or another, he would see his friend again. They walked out of the church and to the river. The church emptied out behind them and followed. The river was about a mile away from the church, but Naruto it could have been only a few yards. His view of the world came back into sharp clarity when he felt the water lapping up around his boots. The others let go of the urn, leaving him alone with its weight. The priest came to him and stood before the urn. As we are born, so must we die, he prayed. We return this soul back to the river and pray that the gods look favorably upon her as she returns to them. He backed and away. Naruto knew that was his cue. He took one step onto the water and then another. His feet felt heavy as he walked out onto the river's surface. He walked out to the middle of the river. The tribe on the riverbank sang something in a low, quiet voice. He couldn't say what it was too quiet. He stopped and looked down at the river. It flowed through his feet, ignoring him. He wasn't important to it. He looked down at the urn in his hands. Goodbye, Quan Misli, he whispered to it. We will meet again. He knelt down and released the urn into the water. It should have bobbed and floated down the river when he let go. But there was a weight in the urn's bottom. It sank down into the depths, vanishing within seconds. He stood there, watching it disappear. The low song vanished. My daughter is dead, Hector said from the riverbank, his voice strong. So let us celebrate her life. Fiesta! He proclaimed, and the tribe roared in agreement. Naruto just stared in amazement as a party atmosphere quickly came into place. He saw food, drinks, and heard lively music. Was anyone else expecting this? He asked. No, Shikaka said, sounding honestly surprised for once. Hey, look at that, Aisabu said. James is still at the bank. Naruto saw the marine standing there. He walked back to shore and went to him. This is surprising, he said right away. No, sir, not really, James said right away. This is normal. We don't stay mournful for our funerals. The dead would find it rude. So we celebrate. He gestured to the party. Care to have a drink and mingle, Commander? He couldn't say no. This was a celebration of Quan Misli after all. Lead the way, he replied. Stand ready, he told his tenants as they walked to the party. So long as they don't party like Krogan, we'll be fine, Kurama told him, the other 8 nodding in agreement. Thanks to that party of Tuchenka, they had new standards of tolerance. They didn't want to reach those standards again. Codex Entry, History SEA Emperor, one of the more, if not most, conflicting people in the galaxy, the Sea Emperor terrorized Earth for the better half of a century. His successors held power for 3 more centuries, but not at the same level of power. There are no clear records of his birth or childhood. Even his name is disputed. What is known about the Sea Emperor is that he started out as a pirate. After gaining significant power and resources from his raiding and gathering allies, he turned from pirate to conqueror, attacking the elemental countries, Midgard, and the frontier, starting the First Expansion War. At the time, the Alliance members kept to themselves. Peace had held for so long with minor disputes. When he attacked, they were unprepared and unable to respond properly. The First Expansion War was a complete success for the Sea Emperor, lasting only 6 months. Once he had a significant foothold in each continent, he stopped expanding and worked on fortifying what he had gained. He did not establish his capital in any of the continents, but rather built it out on sea in the form of a fleet of ships. It quickly became known as the Sailing City. 5 years later, the Second Expansion War began. This lasted for 3 years and ended in victory for the Alliance, thanks to new technology, sea carrier ships. When the Alliance won the war and captured the Sailing City, the Sea Emperor was mortally wounded in the fight. When he was found in his cabin, he infamously stated, "I'd die a patriot for you," before dying. Subsequent interrogation of his commanders and researching of his journals revealed a more detailed picture of the Sea Emperor to the Alliance. Instead of a pirate greedy for land and power, the man was actually a believer in the Alliance. Having felt that it had been weakened by the years of peace, he believed that it needed an enemy to focus on. When he felt that his pirating wasn't enough, he had turned to more drastic measures. The next Sea Emperor claimed power over the Sailing City the next year, and harried the Alliance until his death 5 years later. The succession of Sea Emperors lasted for another 300 years with varying levels of success in their wars. In fact, there are those who believe that the Sea Emperors after the first were actually people chosen by the highest authority in the Alliance to act against the Alliance, all to keep them sharp. While it is a popular theory, it had never actually been proven. Chapter 65. You want to talk about it? Location: Tuchanka. Grunt threw his opponent to the ground, pinning him with his foot. The Krogan tried to get up, but the foot wouldn't budge. Surrender, Grunt commanded. You lost. It didn't take his opponent long to tap out. The audience roared their approval at the fight. Listening to their roars set fire to his blood. He looked around for his next challenger. Even though he had succeeded in his right, there were still some who looked down at him for being tank-bred. He fought them all, earning their respect with each fight. And with each fight, he proved himself to be a strong member of Clan Urdnot. But instead of a challenger, he got a message. Urdnot Grunt, a new Krogan said, stepping into the ring. Rex has need of you. His blood protested, wanting to keep fighting. But his training from Naruto-sensei cooled it. He on the throne? He asked. No. His office. He knew where that was. He left the ring amidst disappointed shouts. He made his way across the clan grounds to Rex's office. The clan leader was finishing a call from his Omni-tool. Grunt, he said. Who was that? A contact off-planet. Not why I called you. He looked the younger Krogan over. Ever since you came back from the Normandy, you've been giving Clan Urdnot recognition and glory. It's about time we did something about that. How? Grunt asked. I'm forming a commando group, made up of Krogan from all the clans. They'll be the toughest, strongest, and the most ferocious. He looked the younger Krogan in the eye. You'll be leading them. He grinned ferociously. Sounds good. Our enemies are going to tremble at our coming. Provided you're able to get them to fight together. These are Krogan, Grunt. They're going to have their own opinions and will challenge you if you even show a hint of weakness. Rex, I'm already in. You don't need to sell me on it. He was honored that he had been chosen, but he was still excited for the chance. When do I meet them? Within the week, Rex told him. If you can get them under control, I'll send you out on missions. With any luck, this new group would be a new face of Krogan to the galaxy. And they would stop the Reapers in their tracks. Rex was no fool. He knew the Reapers were coming. And that meant a war was coming too. Location Earth. Right this way, the weedy-looking man said as he ushered Naruto into a room. Naruto allowed him to do that, but it didn't mean he approved of it. Man, this guy is being pushy without actually pushing me. It can happen, Saiken told him. Besides, Kurama added, you agreed to this. That was true. It was why he wasn't trying to argue with the guy. He was led into a room that looked like it was filled with cameras and lights. Please wait in here, my lord, his usher told him, gesturing into the room. He stepped inside, immediately noticed something. Hey, where is everyone else? He asked, looking back at him. He waved it off, trying to make it seem like it was nothing. Oh, don't worry about that, my lord. The blonde was most certainly going to worry about that. In his experience, walking into a room and being told to wait there meant the waiter was going to die, sometimes by the room itself. He glared at the man and folded his arms. That's not good enough, he said, a warning tone edging his voice. Where is everyone else? The man laughed nervously. They're on their way soon. The producers didn't want to spook you with the people right away. What was he, some kind of fragile glass picture? He had never met the producers for this documentary, and already he wanted to have a word with them. He said, not believing a single word he was being told. The man was actually sweating now. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead. Lord Naruto, please just wait here. Your interviewer will come in first, and then the crew will be right behind me. He vanished out of the door faster than Naruto could say anything to him. The blonde glared at the door. Why don't you leave me in a room with a bomb? Kurama rolled his eyes. That already happened to you. He knew that. He could deal with that with relative ease. Being shoveled into a room and quickly left alone was enough to make his shinobi senses perk up and look for danger. He forced himself to breathe easy. He was not in any danger here. He was still on the island. The tribe or the Akatsuki hadn't found him. He walked past all the cameras and lights. They were all focused on one area, and that's where he would go. He found himself looking at a couple of chairs facing each other against a set of bookcases. He went over to one of the bookcases and reached for a book. It came out easily. At least it's not faked, he thought to himself, putting the book back. That was a comfort. Hey Naruto, said Kurama. What? Look above the bookcases. He tilted his head upwards. Right above was a map of the elemental countries. It was done in paper and ink, showing an artist's detail to it. He only had to look once at the paper to know that it was old. He didn't even have to see that to know it. He had seen this map long before he came into this room. I see that you've found the map, an old voice said from behind him. He turned around, stopping himself from reaching for a weapon. A man with a mane of silver hair and matching trimmed beard stood with the cameras. His green eyes looked curiously at him behind a pair of glasses. He was dressed simply, a pair of pants and a sweater. Who are you? Naruto asked. I am Nathaniel, professor at the library with degrees in historical warfare, he introduced himself with a slight bow. His tone was polite and cultured. He came forward with his hand extended. There's no need to introduce yourself. You don't require one, Naruto Uzumaki. The shinobi shook the professor's hand. Glad to hear someone say my name without attaching Lord to it, he remarked. It felt nice. The professor chuckled. Considering that we're going to be talking quite a bit, I felt that a bit of comfort will go a long way. So you're going to be interviewing me? Yes. He looked up at the map. As I was saying, I see you found the map. It's kinda hard not to miss it. He smiled. It's an antique, dated back to the Fourth Shinobi World War. I know. I've seen it before. Nathaniel looked at him with a quizzical look. Oh? Have you? That's the same map we used to see how much ground we had lost during the war. He still remembered that map being lined with red ribbons, showing just how much Obito and his followers had taken. He looked at Nathaniel. But you already knew that, didn't you? I did. This map was preserved since the war's end, stored in Konoha's Shinobi History Museum. If he had been walking, that piece of news would have stopped Naruto dead in his tracks. Shinobi History Museum? He repeated. Yes, said the professor. It's been generously loaned out to the company for this documentary. I believe that the producers hope you will use it to show where battles occurred, a sort of prelude before we go there in person. Wait, go back a moment. There's a museum about shinobi in Konoha? He looked at the shinobi with a baffled look. Yes, I already said there was. Is that so surprising? Considering that it's supposed to be a hidden village, yes, it's surprising. The first time he had ever been to a museum was when Jiraiya took him to one on their training trip. It had been about Edagawa, and to be honest, he found it boring. Ah, yes, I can see how you would see it like that. He sounded a little uncomfortable, which was odd since he had nothing to be uncomfortable about. You must realize, Naruto, that Konoha is no longer really considered a hidden village. It's a city that's stretched out beyond its original borders. As much as the fox would love to say otherwise, Naruto wasn't a complete idiot. He knew full well that with 2,000 years the village would grow into something more. That wasn't what worried him. Do they still train shinobi there? Yes, they do. He breathed a little easier at that. Thank Kami for that. He glanced at the professor. So how faithful is the museum? Nathaniel gathered he was asking if it told the unvarnished truth about Konoha. He had visited the museum many times and found it did not pander to anyone. It's completely faithful, he said with surety. In fact, I've noticed that in your section of the museum, you were frequently called a knucklehead idiot in your childhood. He shook his head and laughed. Yeah, that was true. Still is, Kurama said. Komi was more focused on what they heard. Naruto, you've got your own section in a museum. Not worried about that right now, Komi. How could you not be worried about that? It wasn't every day somebody heard that they had a museum section. And yet, here was his Jinchuriki making it seem like it was nothing. You know, Naruto, suggested Nathaniel, you really should go see that museum. That's if they let me go to Konoha, he replied with a small bitterness in his voice. He hesitated, unsure of what to say to that. Perhaps the simplest would be the best route. Who are they? You know, the blonde said, throwing up a vague gesture, the powers that be. The ones who have me staying here for my protection. I thought that you had left to go to the land of waves and the great jungle. I had to get permission for that first one, and someone requested that I go to the second. Somehow, I don't think that they'll let me go back to Konoha. Why's that? He stopped himself before he said anything revealing. He didn't know if the professor was read in on his situation. It was best not to risk it. I'm technically a prisoner, he lied. They might be thinking that my going to Konoha would give me the courage to run away. Would you? No, of course not, he said instantly. I would have to do several things there before I would even think about running off. I would have to report into the Hokage, check in on everyone that I had known, eat at Ichiraku ramen, not to mention make sure that my apartment is cleaned out. He paused and looked at Nathaniel. My apartment is still there, right? Yes, it is. The entire apartment block has been turned into a historical site. He didn't know what that was supposed to mean, but it didn't sound like a good thing. They turned it into a museum? More or less, yes. Look at it this way, Shikaku said brightly. You'll never have to worry about where your fans are going to be. They'll be right outside. Would one of you kill him, please? He begged the others. Kurama pretended to give it some thought. Tempting, but no, he finally said. I need someone around that I can insult. Hey! So, asked Nathaniel, are you ready? He looked up at the map one more time. Care to help me bring that thing down? Down? The professor repeated quizzically. Yeah, down. You guys were planning to use it for this documentary, right? Realization dawned in his eyes. He looked up at the map. Yes, that was the plan. I believe that they wanted us to use pointers to point specific locations on the map. While it's still up there? Asked the blonde. Yes. Fuck that. He went to the shelves and started climbing up. Thanks to the sturdiness of the shelves and his shinobi training, he was able to get on top without anything breaking. He lifted the map off its hook. Coming down, he called out, shifting the map so it would start falling downwards. Grab an end, would ya? Nathaniel was almost in shock at what he was seeing. You can't be serious. Of course I'm serious. Grab an end. Shocked as he might have been, the professor still grabbed the end coming towards him and held it steady. Naruto leapt down from the shelves, careful not to break the map he held. Thanks, he told Nathaniel. He looked around and saw a predicament. HM, we're going to need a table. A table? Repeated Nathaniel. Yep, a table, he said with confidence. Why would we need a table? To put the map on it, he replied. He glanced down briefly at the map in question. Also, we're going to have to take this out of its frame. What? Yeah, that way it can rest better on the table, not look so stiff. He started to eye the framework. You know a way to get this free? The professor stared at him in complete shock. You're serious. Of course I am. It'll work better this way, trust me. And already, he doesn't trust you, Saiken remarked, seeing the look on his face. That's because he knows, on some instinctive level, that if he does trust Naruto, he's going to end up doing something he'll regret, Kurama declared. Naruto shot an inward glare at the fox. I heard that. I know. The doors opened with a loud slam and people started flooding through them. They filled the room and their voices did the same thing. Is this what a studio looks like all the time? Naruto had to wonder. They were only doing a documentary, and it was this crazy? Kurama watched with an abject fascination. Makes Shinji's offer less appealing, doesn't? He asked. Naruto nodded. Hold up! Hold up! Shouted a woman, coming to the front. She wore a shirt that sleeves pushed back to her elbows and had a hard expression beneath her glasses. Just what the hell are you doing? She demanded. Who are you? Naruto asked back. She glared at him. I'm the woman who's going to kick your ass all over these walls if I don't a proper answer, now. Think she's related to Sakura? Asked Gyuki. Sun looked at her more closely. I think she's supposed to have pink hair. Not necessarily, Isabu objected. That Grissom guy we met only had Sakura's eyes, not her hair. I'm sorry, ma'am, Nathaniel apologized to the lady. This was something that I had not planned on doing. She fixed him with her look. What is it? She asked. Naruto needed some answers about who this woman was. Hey, Nate, he said, who's the woman? He jerked his head at the woman in question. She folded her arms. I am standing right here. Nathaniel looked at him with a slightly panicked eye. She's Astrid Edman. She's the producer of this documentary. Oh, all right, he said. That was somebody he could talk to. He looked over and asked her, hey, any chance you can find us a table? She frowned in confusion. That same confusion was tinged with irritation. What in the name of Odin do you need a table for? He jostled the map. To put this on, he replied. Why? He thought it would be better, ma'am, Nathaniel explained. Naruto nodded in agreement. Also, we need to take this out of the frame. She looked at him speculatively, not at all what he had been expecting from her. Why exactly do you want to take it out of the frame for? She asked finally. So we can drape it over the table, just like we used to. Naruto, said Nathaniel, this map hasn't been used for over 2 millennia. We can't just take it out of the frame and drape it over a table. Why can't we? He asked. That what it was supposed to be used for. You know what? Said Astrid, I like it. She broke out a wide grin as she whirled around. You! She called out, pointing at one of the crew. Go find a table. Make sure it's big enough for the map. It was a testament to how well the crew must have known her that the guy took off without asking a single question. Eric. One of the guys working on the cameras came over. Yeah, boss? He asked, making sure his hat was still on backwards. I want to reposition a camera. How? She looked over at the men still holding the map. Where were you planning on putting the table? She asked Naruto. Right between us, he answered. He also wondered why she would ask that question. Where else would he put the table? But she just grinned again and said, perfect. She turned for the cameraman. You think you can angle a camera so it's looking down at the map? He just smirked. Of course I can. You doubt me, Astrid? She rolled her eyes. Just get to it, Eric. Yeah, he said, giving her a wave of the hand as he walked off. Sun listened to the two of them and knew instantly what they were. They're friends. Yeah, we saw that, Matatabi told the Yambi. They weren't blind. Naruto was focused on more important things. So, are we going to get this out of the frame or what? He asked, jostling the map again. Astrid nodded. Someone, get some tools and get this map out of the frame. She shouted at the crew. It was a good thing that people who helped make the set also knew carpentry. They were able to get the map out of its frame with ease. Finding the table and getting the camera set took a little longer. Naruto and Nathaniel waited off to the side while the work was being done. I must say, remarked Nathaniel, this is certainly not how I expected the beginning of this to go. Kurama snickered. How much does anyone want to bet? People say that a lot after meeting Naruto? He asked. Naruto replied, no bet. They probably did, in one way or another. While they waited, he looked over at the professor. So, you ever worked with a guy named Zaid in the library? He asked. Nathaniel was a little surprised by the question, mostly because he hadn't been expecting it. Why do you ask? I worked with the guy for a bit, and he saw that he used to go to the library for historical warfare. Wait, Zaid? Repeated Nathaniel, Zaid Masani? Yeah, that's him. He smiled. I do know him. In fact, I remember him fondly. He used to be one of my students, one of my best actually. He mentioned that he liked the wars that involved multiple nations. That he did. I remember that we used to have quite the arguments about some of those wars. His smile turned fond. Our one argument about the Sea Emperors managed to draw such a crowd that even the head of the library came to see who would win. Now the blonde was curious. What about the Sea Emperors? Oh, it was the old question that's been hashed since it was first asked. I haven't heard it. Nathaniel just remembered that the man beside him had missed out a lot in the past 2,000 years. That wasn't to say he didn't read up. The professor had shinobi in his classes and knew they came prepared, but he probably read the broad strokes and not the details. He might know about the Sea Emperors but not what was discussed about them. The question was whether the Sea Emperors after the original were ordered to become so by the Alliance in order to provide the Alliance with an enemy. I took the side of it being untrue and Zaid believed that it was. In his own words, the only kind of enemy who persisted for that long was an enemy needed. Makes senses, I guess, Naruto conceded. He wasn't a great thinker about these kinds of things. But that was mostly because he hadn't thought about it much. What do you think about it? The professor asked him. It was a great opportunity to peer inside the shinobi's mind and look at what made him think before the cameras came on. Naruto thought about it for a moment longer, and then shrugged his shoulders. It doesn't really matter. That's it? That's all you have to say about it? Yeah, pretty much. He saw the disappointed look in the guy's eyes. I think it was expecting a little bit more from you, Gyuki noted. He said, yeah, I can see that. So give it to him. He was already planning to do that. Look, Nate, can I call you Nate? He asked. Nathaniel kinda gets a mouthful after a while. He probably should have asked earlier, but it slipped his mind. Nathaniel didn't really think it of such. That was his name, and people called him by it. But he was used to be called Nate, mostly by friendly colleagues. By all means, he permitted. Thanks. Look, I wasn't there, it's already happened. There's no real point in discussing the idea, not unless we can ask the guys yourself. That's impossible. I know. I probably wouldn't do well in your library. I wasn't really good at sitting still and taking lessons like that. My attention kept wandering and I was frequently bored. A question came to Nathaniel. It would probably be rude to ask such a question, but he felt like it should be asked. Do you know nothing besides being a shinobi? Fortunately for him, the blonde wasn't offended. No, not really, he answered with a shrug. It's been my life since I was 12. Then what are you going to do when you finally retire? That question made him pause. Retire? In his mind, shinobi didn't retire. They kept going, kept serving, until they died. The only ones who didn't go that way, who did actually retire, were the ones who were injured so severely that they couldn't recover. I never thought about that, he said. I didn't think that I would ever retire. People do retire. Some of my colleagues at the library are retired shinobi. How about that? He thought to himself. Well, I don't think I'm going to retire. I've heard a lot of young people going into the military say the same thing. They like to think they're invincible. I'm different. They've said that too. The shinobi he was talking about meant differently, but it was still needed to be pointed out. Despite his being sealed away, Naruto Uzumaki was still a man in his late 20s. His own life was ahead of him, and it could go past his being a shinobi. If you do retire, what would you do? The first thing Naruto wanted to say was that he wasn't going to retire. They almost came up out of his mouth. But the professor was curious about what he might do if it happened. It made him think about it too. He didn't think he could go to a place like the library. He would go stir crazy. He didn't have any skills that weren't involved with the shinobi life. If he retired, he would be lost, adrift. I don't know what I would do. Kurama rolled his eyes. You're being overdramatic, Gaki. You'd find something. The fox was right. He would find something. As he thought about it, a memory came back to him, a memory of his childhood. He had kept a garden on the rooftop of his apartment before he became a genin. It was his little sanctuary against the world, until a fire burned everything to ashes and the landowner refused to let him rebuild. I could become a gardener, he finally said. A gardener? Interesting, replied Nathaniel. He shrugged. I've got something of a green thumb. All right, Eric the cameraman called out, we're ready for you. They started back for the chairs, with the table and the map now in between them. So, have you read your lines? Nathaniel asked Naruto. Lines? He asked, not sure of what he was talking about. Your lines, what you're going to say when we start filming. I had lines? They were sent to your room. Oh, that? Now he knew what he was talking about. There was a small stack of papers on his table. It wasn't there when he had gone to sleep, so naturally he was cautious. He didn't touch it. Sorry, didn't look at it. You didn't? I didn't know where it came from. For all I know, it could have been a bomb. Besides, why would I need lines? I know what I'm talking about. Quite frankly, the fact that they had tried to give him lines felt a little insulting. The professor looked like he disagreed with the sentiment. Look, just start like you would and I'll reply like I would. We'll go from there. The producer is not going to like this change, he told him. They wanted me. They'll be getting me. That means everything. Oh dear, he thought. He hoped they wouldn't get in trouble for this. They sat down in the chairs. Naruto relaxed into his while Nathaniel sat a bit more formally, crossing his leg over his knee. 3, 2, 1, and action! The director called out. The professor looked at the camera. As many people have said over the years, the Fourth Shinobi World War was a watershed moment in history, he began. But we haven't known what that war was truly like, having only seen it through books and videos. Now, however, we have a chance to know what it is truly like to have lived and fought in that war. I am Professor Nathaniel Flynn. With me is the man and the legend, Naruto Uzumaki. Is he going to call you that the entire time? Gyuki asked, a distasteful look on his face. Kami, I hope not, Kurama grumbled. We don't need him getting a swelled head over this. I resent that, Naruto told the fox. Then don't get a swelled head. Nathaniel looked at him. "Hello, Naruto." "Hey there, Nate," he said back. "So, where would you like to start?" "At the beginning," he replied. "When would you say that the war started?" He settled into his chair, ready for what came next. "I know that officially the war started when Obito proclaimed it to the Kages. For a time, we felt the same way too. But the war, the real war, started when we received word that the Land of Water's capital, Michishio, had been destroyed." "Did it feel like an ordinary day that day?" "All days do," he said, but still nodded. He leaned out over the map. "When we got word about what happened, Obito had already struck 2 days ago. The Godame Mizuki sent her fastest shinobi to the mainland to find the closest hidden village, Konoha. Why had the shinobi and samurai begun to retreat to their separate villages? Wouldn't it have been best to stay united in the event that Obito reappeared? I don't know if the Kages discussed that or not. But the general belief we all had was that since the Alliance didn't know where Obito was, it was best to go back to our villages and keep an eye out for him." He began to use his finger to trace out what he was describing, sweeping across the map in long strokes. The Kiri shinobi had already gone back to their village while the rest of us were still moving supplies. Konoha was the closest hidden village before going to Suna or Iwa. It was decided to use it as a focal point before moving the other shinobi back to their homes. Nathaniel followed his fingers with sharp eyes, taking in everything. "And then the messenger found Konoha." "Yeah, he practically killed himself getting to the gate." He paused, remembering that day. It had quickly turned chaotic once that Kiri genin staggered through the gate. His showing was a mixed blessing. "How so?" asked Nathaniel. "We have always been led to believe that it was his race to Konoha that alerted the Alliance. It did, but it also showed how we had let our guard down. Even before we all started running for the Land of Water, we knew that we wouldn't be able to save all of it. We got warning that Obito was coming for Kiri and we all went there to prepare a defense." "Were you there personally?" "After all, the war was started to protect you and Killer B. The both of us were there. We already had the argument about us not fighting with Tsunade and B's brother. There wasn't any time to have it again, not when it was likely we were going to lose one of the hidden villages within days. And so, the Battle of Kiri began." He looked at Naruto. "What was it like?" "Confusing at first," he answered. "We didn't know when or where Obito would strike. Not to mention we were still trying to deal with all of the civilians being evacuated. Tensions were running high with all of us. That's when Obito struck. He hovered above the village like he was some kind of god. He didn't destroy Kiri like Pain had Konoha. I don't know why. Maybe it was because he wanted to make us suffer for continuing to fight. He started raining down Amaterasu fire onto the village. Everything started to burn. People started to scream. The memory of it came in a flash. For a moment, he could still smell the fires burning everything they could find. "Don't think about it, Naruto," Kurama told him. Yuki agreed. "Suppress it." He took a moment to breathe and focus. He took that memory and shoved back down into his mind. He had to keep talking to prevent the memory and the like to bubble. Our heavy hitters turned their jutsu skyward to attack Obito. It didn't work. He would knock the jutsu aside or simply moved out of the way. They caused more damage to the village than he did. How was the Amaterasu extinguished? Sasuke had come with us. He wanted to fight Obito, but as soon as the Amaterasu started raining down, we had to convince him to put them out. That was never mentioned. He couldn't help that small smile come onto his lips. That's because the convincing came from me and Sakura through bodily harm. I threatened to kick his ass and she told him that she would punch him clear across the village if he didn't put out the fires. Nathaniel looked a little surprised at that, and a little sick. We didn't mean it. We had to motivate him. Yes, by threatening to kick him in the ass up and down Konoha's main street, Kurama remarked with a very dry tone. He ignored the fox. The fact is, he started putting out the fires and we were allowed to deal with the rest of the problem. But it didn't take us long to realize what happened was a lost cause. That's when the complete retreat was given? He nodded. As soon as they knew we couldn't hold him, the Mizukage and the Reikage ordered the retreat. No one argued with the order, not when the village was already burning. We all ran for the nearest port and sailed away from the Land of Water. The Mizukage never forgave herself for what she had done. And then you prepared for the next strike. He looked down at the map once more, bringing his hands out to it. We thought that he would travel from the Land of Water to the nearest port, either in the Land of Fire, the Land of Lightning, or somewhere in between. We put watches on the coast, waiting to see him coming. But he slipped right past us. He traced where he thought Obito had flown. We guessed that he flew out of sight of the coast until he reached the land of tea. We had no one watching that coastline and he flew over unhindered, right into the land of rivers. He had gotten behind us and laid waste to another village before we could respond. This time, we didn't reach them in time. We spent a day looking for survivors and getting them to safety. After that, there was a change in tactics required. The Kages called a meeting of all available strategists and tacticians in our ranks. Were you a part of that meeting? He laughed a little. Good Kami, no, he said. My idea of tactics was to charge into battle and make it up from there. I was good at improvising, but improvisation was not needed at that meeting. Sasuke and Shikamaru were called to join. The meeting ran for an entire day and had everyone holding their breaths. We all wanted to know how we were going to beat Obito. When the meeting was over and they all came out, they got swarmed, demanding answers. The shinobi were ordered to keep the civilians back and calm while the meeting-goers were able to get out onto the streets. The Kages made the official announcement the next day, but everyone who was a friend to one of the strategists or tacticians heard what the plan was, heard about it within hours. And this plan was the flexible response? He couldn't help the grimace. It just came onto his face. I really wish that we had come up with a better name than that. It sounds like something out of a book. The people who hadn't been to the meeting just called it the plan. What were the details of the plan? The idea was to have shinobi forces spread out throughout the land, positioned at villages, towns, and cities. If Obito was sighted, there could have been at least a warning so we could have a quicker response time. He spread his hands out like he was pushing apart sand. The bigger the place, the more shinobi teams were put there. The only places we couldn't put shinobi were the capitals. Nathaniel nodded. Yes, I've read about that. A reason had never been given for such a move. Why was it? Was it due to a lack of manpower? Naruto only wished that it was because of that. But the true reason was something much more stupid. Actually, it was because the daimyos didn't want the shinobi in their cities. What? That's the reason? Yeah, he said with a short nod. Sounds truly stupid, doesn't it? Whether it was stupid or not was beside the point. Why would they refuse shinobi support? I didn't know at the time and just called them idiots. I guess they were afraid that for all the support and strength the alliance was showing, they didn't want them in the capital in fear of taking over, or something like that. The Kages tried to protest the idea, to make them change their minds, but they were stubborn and refused. It took us losing the Land of Fire capital and the loss of Kumo for them to change their minds. I see. But as much as we know about the war itself, we know so little about the kind of lives being lived. What was that like? Honestly, it didn't feel like any other kind of life. The professor considered those words. They weren't the kind he had been expecting to hear. A quick glance out of the corner of his eye showed that Ms. Astrid was talking to the director. She must have thought the same. It looked like she was about to have the director stop shooting. He had to keep going. Are you saying that because it was your life? He asked before the director could say anything. In part, yeah, Naruto agreed. The rest of it was beside a level of tension layered over the village. Life went on as it always had. People woke up, went to work, enjoyed times with their friends, and came home to their families. The shinobi who weren't heavily involved in the war still took jobs. Still? He asked. Cut! The director shouted. Astrid strode forward to them. What is going on here? She demanded. Naruto looked up at her, confused. What do you mean? You're not saying your lines. I know. Did it really take them that long to figure what he was saying? You know? He didn't see the need for her to shout. Yes, I didn't read the lines you gave me. The director came up behind her. He heard that last bit, and now was rubbing a crease in his head. Why didn't you read them? He asked. Mr. Lee, asked Nathaniel, did anyone send a person to tell the commander what the lines were? If they hadn't, it would explain how the blonde distrusted it. He scowled, making the creases on his forehead more visible. He was sent an email. He looked at Naruto. Did you look through your email? No. I don't look at it first thing in the morning. There were more important things to consider, like getting breakfast, checking the news to see what was happening in the galaxy. Thor's storming fury, Astrid muttered. We're going to have to cancel the day's shooting. She glared at Naruto. Oh dear, said Nathaniel. He was hoping that it wouldn't come to this. Naruto had a different thought. Why should we cancel? He asked the producer. So you can learn your lines. Why? She clenched her hands into her claws. Are you trying to make me kill you? She demanded. Ha! I wish she could do that, Kurama said with a bark of a laugh. She would barely scratch you. That might do something, actually, Saiken commented. Have you seen her nails? They certainly were long enough, Naruto noted. It was probably not a good idea to make her really angry. If he was to use the scale of anger from Tsunade and Sakura, the producer hadn't reached that level yet. Astrid, that's Ms. Astrid to you, buddy, she snapped at him. Whoa there, a woman with attitude, remarked Sun. He grinned. I like it. Koko rolled his eyes. You would. Naruto ignored them both. Astrid, he said again, ignoring her angry look. May I ask who was it who wrote me lines? Our writers, she told him. Okay. Why? Why? He nodded. Why did they write lines for me? It seems kinda pointless. They're writers, the director told him, pinching his nose in the process. He looked like he was trying to stop himself from having a migraine. They're supposed to write you lines. I get that. I don't think you do. Otherwise you would have read your lines and memorized them. Look, you guys wanted me for this documentary because I offered an actual view on the war. Am I wrong? Nathaniel came to his side of the argument. No, you're not wrong, Naruto. He looked at the producer and director. They nodded shortly. Then why would you have writers give me lines? It doesn't make any sense. If you want the truth of what happened, let me say I think. He gestured at the professor sitting across from him. He can guide me with any questions he has ready for him, but I'll answer with my own words, not anything that was prepared in advance for me. Both Astrid and Mr. Lee looked like their perfect plan was crumbling into dirt all around them. He found it a bit odd and funny at the same time. It was like they never considered this possibility. It was like they didn't know what they were getting into when they brought him on board. Nathaniel glanced at him and said to them, It does make sense. Talking to him just now, it felt more real than any line that could have been written for him. Perhaps we should continue with this. Mr. Lee considered it first. As surprising as it had been, he could see the logic behind it too. It would add a sense of realism to the production. He looked over at his producer. We might as well let them continue, he told her. See where it goes. If she was a more stubborn woman, Astrid Edmond would have argued the point. She was almost tempted. But she also had a production to shoot, and wasting time was not an option. All right, fine, she conceded. She threw one last look at Naruto. Don't make me regret this. They walked back to their seats. Naruto and Nathaniel settled back into their seats once more. 3, 2, 1, action, called Mr. Lee. Nathaniel slipped back into performance like nothing had happened. Still? He asked, repeating the question. Naruto nodded briefly. A hidden village's lifeblood was in the missions it took. We had to take them in order to survive. But on the whole, everything felt normal? Everything was normal. There were even days when it felt like there wasn't a war. Of course, he added, we were always quick to lose that feeling. One slip up and we would have been dead. You also gained an unlikely ally during the war, Orochimaru. What was that like, having him on your side? He knew the answer to that instantly. Unsettlingly, he told the professor. He started nodding. I believe I can understand that. You can't, not until you met Orochimaru. Can you elaborate? He didn't want to. Thinking about Orochimaru and what he had done to them all, in spite of his helping during the war, made Naruto start looking for weapons to use. He had always wanted to bury a kunai into the snake Sannin's head, but he refrained himself from doing that, no matter how tempting it was. But he was asked a question and people would probably want to know. The first thing you have to realize about Orochimaru was the impression he first gave a person, he explained. I talked to him many times and each time I felt like he was sizing me for an experiment he was working on. I wasn't the only one who felt like that, practically the rest of the Konoha 12 did too. But in spite of his impression, he was also a good talker and could be quite convincing when suggesting a plan of attack. He was so good that we were afraid of what would happen if he was left alone with Sasuke. So we swore to never let that happen. Every time they were in the same room, one of us would be there. Usually it was either him or Sakura. How did the rest of the alliance feel about the snake Sannin? No one trusted him. Both the Tsuchikage and the Reikage advocated executing him ASAP, but the other three refused. From what I heard, it wasn't Tsunade who saved him. The professor didn't know that and was a little surprised by it. He would have thought that as old teammates, the Godame Hokage would have been the first one to argue on Orochimaru's behalf. If not her, then who? He asked. The Mizukage, Mei Terumi. We were told she said that we would need every shinobi in this fight, even if we don't like them. But even she didn't trust Orochimaru. An ANBU guard was placed on him whenever he was in the village. How was his relationship with Lady Tsunade? He didn't need to think about that one. They were cordial with each other, probably almost friendly. Shizen once told me about how the two of them would spend long nights drinking and reminiscing about their old days. I didn't believe her, and so did no one else. We didn't think that Orochimaru was even capable of reminiscing. He was a traitor to the village, after all. Do you know what would have happened to him had he survived the war? Would he have come back to the village? The shinobi shrugged his shoulders, saying, honestly, we never thought about that. There wasn't any time to think about it. The war loomed over all our heads, and the only kind of thinking we did about what came next was the immediate end, killing Obito. But not all shinobi thought the same. A scowl came onto his face at that implication. He had to bring that up. Of course he had to, said Gyuki. It was a part of the war. Did you think that he was just going to leave it? He was hoping for that, just a little bit. But it was asked, and now he had to answer it. At the start, we all did, he told Nathaniel. But as the war kept dragging on, people started to think that we were on the losing side. No one outright said it, but if we paid attention in a restaurant or a bar, any one of us could hear the mutterings. Did the Kages do anything to prevent such mutterings? None that I was aware of, he replied. We were all so busy trying to fight the war, we didn't think about the civilians were saying. But it wasn't just the civilians. Shinobi were talking about it too. They were. I just thought it was something to talk about when we were running to the rescue or fighting the people Obito led. I was wrong when I started learning Shinobi was defecting to Obito's side. He remembered all those who betrayed the alliance. It had always left a sour feeling in his stomach. At some detail, Gaki, Kurama told him. Huh! He sees the broad picture of the defectors. He doesn't see the names or the faces. Give him some of those faces, those names. It was a good point. What really hurt was how I knew some of the defectors, he told Nathaniel, and not just me. There were others who knew them. He leaned forward. Like who? There were 3 girls, Ami, Kasumi, and Fuki. Back in the academy, they used to bully Sakura and Ino. They had managed to make peace before we graduated. Sakura and Ino probably thought of them as friends, or at least partially. Looking back now, I could see how they might have felt insecure and jealous. Ino and Sakura had become Chunin within 2 years of becoming shinobi and looked like they were on the fast track to be Jonin during the war. Meanwhile, they were still stuck as genin in what they probably thought what was a rapidly hopeless war. And so, they defected. Yeah, Naruto said with a short nod. They defected. They just left the village and headed for the land Obito controlled, the same as the other defectors. We were all a bit surprised by that, Ino and Sakura a little more than the rest of us. History has told us the defectors were sent almost constantly out into battle against the Alliance, fighting the people they served with. Did that happen with you? With those 3? He asked, shaking his head. No, I never saw them after they defected. None of us did. We had gotten a report that they had died fighting in the land of mountains. We weren't that saddened by their deaths. If we had been closer, that might have been different. What we felt was probably closer to disappointment. Was there anyone who defected that you had known on a better level? Someone you had considered a friend? His first thought went to the rest of the Konoha 12. But he stopped and extended the boundaries. There were a few, but one hit a little harder than the rest. A kid called Shiro. He paused and then amended, I say kid, but he was probably 2 years younger than me. What happened to him? He defected. But before that, he looked up to me. He thought that I would be the one who would lead everyone to victory. He called me senpai and defended me from the naysayers, even getting into brawls on my behalf. Kami knows how many times me or someone else had to pull him out of those brawls. And in all honesty, I didn't want his hero worship. Was it hero worship? Did he not simply admire you? He shook his head hard. That wasn't it by far. No, it was definitely hero worship. He was probably the first one who started to call me Lord Naruto, even after I told him not to. He thought that I could do no wrong. That made his defection hit even harder. He doesn't sound like the kind of person who would believe Obito was winning. He wasn't. Nathaniel asked him, what made him defect? The fact that I wasn't a hero like he thought I was, he answered. He leaned over the map once more and pointed at the Land of Fire. It was a battle close to Adagawa. It was a big town, and we had managed to get there to prevent utter destruction of the place. One of the Kunoichi stationed there was Shiro's sister, and one of the shinobi in the response team was his brother. Shiro tried to get on the response team, and when he couldn't, he begged me to keep his family safe. I made him that promise. But when we got there, his sister was already in the thick of things. A house exploded with her on the street in front of it. If the explosion hadn't killed her, the house collapsing onto the street would have. Her brother was a hothead eager for the fight, and any possible glory that came with it. As soon as we came into contact with Obito's forces, he charged right into the fray. No one was able to pull him back, and it made the other hotheads charge in after him. That was what the enemy had wanted. It was a damn trap. As soon as they ran, Obito's men collapsed a building behind them, cutting them off from the rest of us. We could have gone over the building to their aid easy, but the rest of the enemy forces were doing their best to keep us busy, trying to go after the civilians we were evacuating. By the time we were able to send people to support, it was too late. All the hotheads had been slaughtered. The worst part of it was I didn't reach Shiro's brother in time. Obito had descended upon them, and Shiro's brother, still hungry for glory even as everyone was being killed around him, thought he could end the war right there. We got over the building just in time to watch Obito snap his neck with indifference. He could still see the head jerking to the side, the neck snapping. Stupid kid, he said to himself, sad and angry. He was a stupid kid who didn't listen. Nathaniel didn't speak on those words. What happened after the battle? He asked. We took the dead we could find back home. Shiro was there at the gate, waiting for us. If he closed his eyes, he could still see the eager look the kid had watching them come in. The first thing he saw was his brother's body. The first thing he asked us was where his sister was. We told him. He started crying, and then he tried attacking me, screaming that I had promised him they would be safe. Choji and Kiba had to pull him off me and drag him back into the village. The last thing he screamed was that he hated me, that I was a failed hero. I could see his point. I did fail to keep his family safe. But we were in a war. There was nothing I could have done to save his sister, not when she was 2 streets down from where I was. I tried to keep his brother from rushing into battle, but the idiot would not listen. And no matter how many times he tried telling Shiro that, the kid would not hear it. And so, he defected? Asked the professor. No, not right away, he said, shaking his head. He spent 2 months stewing in his anger and hate for me before deciding that Obito would have the way to kill me. The Alliance shinobi had standing to catch anyone they saw trying to defect. Why didn't you try to stop him? He defected when I was out trying to save another town. The news reached him when he finally got back from that mission. But even if I had been there, I don't think I would have tried to stop him. He keeps surprising with his words, Nathaniel thought. But that was to be expected. Why? He asked. Shiro hated me, blamed me for what happened to his brother and sister. When his parents died in a construction accident, he blamed me for that too. I knew him and considered him a bit of a friend, but if I had gone after him, he would have turned it into a fight, and I would have killed him. There was no doubt in his mind and his voice that would have been the outcome. They might have both been genin, but Naruto's skills were simply better than Shiro's. Did you ever see him again? Once, when Adagawa fell, answered the shinobi. It had been 6 months later, and we had been hearing that Shiro was making more than a name for himself on the other side. He was shooting up in the ranks and thoroughly enjoyed being called the vicious little bastard. We ran into each other outside the palace. I was trying to protect the people getting out. He was trying to loot it. He had his men back off, saying that I was his and his alone. He must have thought that it was going to be some kind of grand fight between us, something that would be told for years to come. The setting was right for it in any case. Nathaniel frowned. I don't remember there being a battle on the palace steps. Good. There wasn't one. The fight lasted half a minute, if that. Shiro charged at me, throwing all the punches and kicks he could at me. Then he stepped back to ready a jutsu. That's when I stepped in and killed him. He was so focused on beating me that he didn't think about his own defense. It allowed me to slit his throat with one kunai swing. He remembered the kid falling to the ground, his brown eyes still full of hate but also with confusion. He didn't know he was dying and he still wanted to kill him. The professor shifted a little in his seat. What happened after that? He asked. Did his men try to avenge him? The question was asked sincerely, he knew that. But he couldn't help chuckling at it. No, they didn't. One thing we had on the people following Obito was discipline. They followed him and their own personal leaders because they had power and were willing to enforce their authority through that power. If a leader was killed, his men would tear themselves apart fighting to become the next leader. There were several assassinations we carried out just for that effect. But if that is so, why were there holdouts from the war? By your own words, they should have torn themselves apart after Obito was killed. The reforging shouldn't have happened. Ooh, he's got you there, Shikaka remarked. Naruto mentally replied, no he does not. He knew how he could respond to that. I've read about the reforging. It seems to be only the smartest leaders survived the war to hold onto their lands. But even then, they still fell to fighting each other. It's just a varied length of time. In any case, Shiro's men didn't care that he had died. They just wanted to loot the palace and have the women. I made them think otherwise. How? Asked Nathaniel. Does he gotta ask? The man said he taught shinobi. He had to know. But if this was for the cameras, might as well give an explanation. I showed them all just what I would do to them if they took another step up the stairs with my killing intent. Ah, yes, that would do it. It would. So, he asked, resting back into the chair, what else would you like to know? They were able to get through the first day of shooting without any minor problems. And the next day went on better. As the days of shooting went on, the only things that irritated Naruto was how they would constantly cut or reshoot something. But he didn't let it build up inside him. It was just a matter of business. By the time the shooting had been going for 2 weeks, the production company was finally able to convince Naruto's handlers, a better word than babysitters, to allow him off the island. He would have thought they would start taking him all around the elemental countries so he could show them the different battle sites. But instead they had taken him to the frontier, to the library. It had certainly been an experience. Walking through those halls and looking at the classes, while not being an experience he wanted to be a part of, he could see how Zaid studied here. He knew the library, which the multiple campuses and buildings were named after, would have gotten Shikamaru's interest, even if he called it a drag. He had wondered why they had taken him here. It was quickly explained when they showed him one of the library's recent jewels, a 3D map that was capable of adjusting size and scale of what the users were seeing. The first time he saw it, Naruto thought it either full immersion came from or full immersion inspired it. They shot that next week using the map. It was fun, Naruto could admit to that. But it felt like something was missing to it. It wasn't like having the kind of map he was used to, nor was it like actually being there. He did what they asked him, talking through the question and showing it on the map, but it didn't have the same kind of feel. When he finally brought up with Nathaniel, someone who helped him understand this kind of production, the professor was quick to explain. The idea was to use the old familiar map as a start, segue into the 3D map while he was talking, before finally showing the both of them and other experts on location. Someone in the crew had suggested they build sets for the places that had changed too much over the years. Both Astrid and Naruto put their feet down on that idea, rejecting it. She rejected it because it would take too long and cost a little too much. His reason was simpler. He was either going to do it in the actual locations or not at all. That was how he found himself back in the Land of Fire, in the city of Nakatani. Hard to believe that this place still exists, he silently remarked, standing in the middle of the street and looking at everything. I find it hard to believe that they were able to rebuild at all, Gyuki said. After all, this place redefined the phrase burning wreck after Obito was done here. Hey, Commander! One of the crewmen shouted. They had taken to calling him that after he kept asking them to stop saying my lord. It took him out of his gazing and back to where he was. Yeah? He said, looking over at where the crew was setting up. We're about ready to start shooting. You want to come back over here so we can do it? Coming, he said back, walking over. Nathaniel was standing close to the crew, along with a hulk of a man named Bjorn who had a doctorate in construction, a degree that Naruto had no idea even existed, and another in history, specifically historical cities and how they were built. Compared to the rest of them, the sole woman of the group looked like she was on the small size, standing tall at 5 feet and 3 inches. Dr. Isabella had her degree in jutsu, specializing in their effects. She was there to understand the jutsu that Naruto would bring up. He walked up to the three of them. You guys ready? Bjorn gave him a look with his brown eyes. Should we be asking you that question, my lord? He asked. Out of everyone there, the Midgardian was the only one who kept calling him that. Why is that? He gestured to the buildings around them. This is the first time you've been back for a long while. And if this was Konoha, I would be having a much different reaction, the shinobi told the bigger blonde. Honestly, this place was just another battle to me. But this was the place that Orochimaru died, said Isabella, her Hispano, what he had been calling jungle, accent floating over her words like a musical note. This is the place of the snake chase. I know it is, Isabella. But to us, even if we had lost that bastard here, it was just another battle to us. She became confused. Bastard? She repeated. He clarified, Orochimaru. Her eyes shined with recognition, but then they dulled with a slight anger. That's a bit harsh, wouldn't you say? He actually had to stop and look at her. Is she defending him? I couldn't say for sure, Isaba told him, but it definitely sounded like that. You've got to be kidding. I don't think she is. Care to correct her? Kurama asked him. It was best done quickly before they figured out just how long she held that opinion. He agreed. A bit harsh? He repeated. To her credit, Isabella stood firm. You might have had trouble with him, Commander, but he was still a person, with all that meant. The urge to mock her with laughter was almost overwhelming. He forced it down and actually talked to her, although his voice was laced with scorn. He twisted my teammate's mind against himself, making him leave the village for revenge, attacked the village and killed the Sandaime Hokage, and wanted to live forever by using people as hosts, taking over a new one when the old couldn't hold him anymore. Every time he came near us, he caused headaches. You'll have to forgive if I choose to see him as a snake bastard than a simple human being. He couldn't be classified as such. Bjorn listened to what he said and looked rather impressed by it. When Isabella opened her mouth to protest, he stopped her. Leave it be, Is. She stopped and swung a glare at him. How many times have I told you not to call me that disgusting name? She demanded. He backed off with his hands up and a grin on his face. Sorry, he told her. Calling her that was a surefire way of getting her attention. But the man has a grievance with him. Don't try to make it any different. He had served in the military as both a tank crew member and gun battery on a ship. He knew what grievances looked like and knew better than to interfere. They got worse because of the interference. Could you take your places, please? Eric the cameraman called out to them. That broke up their conversation. They walked over to the other side of the street, in full view of the cameras. They didn't have Naruto in the center but more off to the side. That way, he could start leading them into the city. 3, 2, 1, action! The director called out. Here in Nakatani, began Nathaniel, was a battle where the snake chase occurred. The snake chase is famous for two reasons, as it is the first time that Obito descended into the battle himself, and for the death of Orochimaru. He looked over at Naruto. What exactly happened during the battle? What caused it? From what I had learned, Orochimaru had gotten some message and took off immediately. Sasuke had seen him as he raced out of the village. He said that it was the only time he had an expression panicked fear on his face. Tsunade quickly assembled a team to follow him, with her leading it. Due to how Obito's forces were taking over the land of Fang and were shifting teams to respond, the most sent after Orochimaru was 20, the Konoha 12 and Anko Mitarashi included. At top speed, it took us 3 days to reach this town, just in time to start seeing it burn. Nakatani is one of a unique set of constructions in the Land of Fire, Bjorn said, gesturing his hand at their surroundings. Originally it was a town for mining a nearby vein of iron. The vein ran dry just as the Third Shinobi World War were beginning, and combined with the threats coming from the Land of Wind, people were rather quick to leave. The Sandaime Hokage ordered such towns to be fortified and resupplied. So, we have a unique blend of simple mining town architecture and shinobi fortification. Isabo was listening to him with a rapt attention. So were Komiai and Sun. Wow, the Yambi said, sounding very impressed by what he heard. Isaba nodded his head. I know, he agreed. Hey, Naruto, did it really have that kind of architecture? I don't know. The place was on fire and we were trying to get the people out. There wasn't really any time to stop and admire the place, he replied. Who found Orochimaru first? Nathaniel asked him. On our side of the fight? He asked back. The professor nodded. It was Tsunade, Sakura, and Ino. They were at the edge of town, checking all the evacuees for injuries. They told me that Orochimaru leapt down from a nearby building, told Tsunade to catch, and threw his granddaughter at her. He banked and ran back into the town, disappearing as fast as he had appeared. At the time, they didn't know the baby was his granddaughter. The most likely thought was she was another one of his experiments. The history books say that when the team realized Obito was chasing Orochimaru, you followed the chase, hoping to take down Obito. Taking him down would be a bit of a stretch. At that point, we were trying to distract him, keep him unfocused. But yeah, we went after them. He noticed that the director was silently signaling him to move, to walk through the town. He turned and did just that. They could hear the camera crew following behind and said nothing about it. They were doing their best to keep their attention on what they were talking about. So you followed right after Orochimaru passed his granddaughter off to Tsunade? Nathaniel asked. No, he said with a shake of his head. It was a little later than that. Remember, the medical setup had been placed at the town's edge. The rest of us were inside the town, trying to get everyone out. We first heard the chase and thought it was another part of the town collapsing on itself. That changed when we figured out that the noise was getting louder and closer. And then you chased after him? And then we chased after him, he agreed. He came to a stop at a four-way intersection. It looked all nice and clean now. All he had to do was squint his eyes and think to remember what it looked like back then. The buildings on fire, the streets littered with rubble and bodies, the feeling of heat on his skin, and the unfortunate smell of meat being cooked all around them. He pulled himself out of that memory and focused on what it was now, clean and peaceful. It wasn't a ruin now. We came through here, he told them. Orochimaru ran through here with Obito flying above and us coming in from behind on the rooftops. Bjorn cast his eyes upwards at the roofs, analyzing them. Given that the roofs were made of ceramic tiles, the supporting frame was wooden, and that the entire building was possibly on fire, staying to the rooftops is a dangerous move. The roof could have collapsed underneath your feet at any given moment, and would have certainly collapsed if you had stayed on it. A few roofs did collapse underneath our feet, Naruto admitted. We almost lost sight that way. If Shikamaru hadn't been there to grab him, he would have fallen to his death inside that burning house. Thankfully, we learned to adapt. Every time we landed on a roof, we made sure to jump off fast. With that kind of speed and focus centered on ensuring you could keep going, you had to have lost time in casting your jutsu, Isabella remarked. Not as much time as you would think. By the time Obito had attacked Nakatani, we had all gotten proficient in flipping through hand seals on the fly. They had been a little good at it before the war, but that's where it really got honed as a skill. We were able to keep up with Obito while staying safe from the roofs. The only downside was that our aims were wobbly at best. Wobbly? It was a little embarrassing to think about it now, really. We kept missing Obito. Her face blanched. You were throwing jutsu and missing? You could have hurt someone or yourselves. You could have destroyed the town even more. Hey, give us some credit, he protested. No one got so far ahead that they would actually be in the firing line. And we knew that we were in a burning town, that's why we had to refrain from using katan jutsu. Mostly we were using suiton or futon. They had been using the suiton to finish off the fires that had broken out. It was just a matter of using it on a wider spread. Nathaniel asked him, where do you think the snake chase started? He gave it a long hard thought as they walked down the street. I think, Nate, it started when Orochimaru found his granddaughter crying in front of the wreck that used to be her home. Her parents must have pushed her out before they died and he found her there. Obito found the both of them and decided to have a little fun with Orochimaru. Are you saying that Obito just chanced upon them? Either that or he was waiting for Orochimaru to show up. He did have a sick sense of dramatics. They had learned that aplenty during the war. Bjorn, where was that house? The professor asked him. He walked over to the nearby wall and pulled out a map. It was a map of the place back during the war, but it didn't look old. It actually looked new. How'd they pull that off? Naruto wondered. Maybe he copied it from somewhere and printed it off, Kurama told him. The fox didn't really care about how he got it. That detail was meaningless. The camera crew got in closer, focusing right on the Midgardian. From what we've gathered from records and history, the house was in the market district, right here, Bjorn said, tapping a pen in the upper east portion of the town. It was close to the marketplace itself, a block south. The pen rested on the street he thought it was. Looks right to me, Naruto thought to himself. He was a part of the group that found the house after the battle. He hadn't been the one who found the bodies, but he had been the one who found the picture of Orochimaru holding his grandchild with her parents at his side, all smiling happily, genuinely happy. It was an emotion he never saw the bastard use in that kind of situation. Bjorn looked back at him. Where was the medical station set up, Naruto? He asked, angling his body so the map could be used by more than one person. The blonde started forward. Don't block the camera, Matatabi reminded him. I know. He had already been told that by the director many times. So move around. He mentally rolled his eyes. I'm already doing that, Matatabi, sheesh. There were times that cat was such a mother hen. He angled himself against the map and examined it. He knew the layout and quickly understood where everything had been. Here, he said, tapping the southeast side of the town. Bjorn nodded and examined the map more closely. Given how it was likely he wanted to avoid being an obvious target, he would have stayed close to the ground. So that means traversing by rooftops would be out. He tapped and traced the pen across the map, emphasizing each point made. The shinobi saw what he was doing. He was drawing out the route Orochimaru ran through the town. He silently held out his hand to the Midgardian. Bjorn gave him the pen and he uncapped it. He wouldn't have been able to take the main streets, he explained, crossing them out. They were too exposed and filled with people running. It would have provided him with cover, Nathaniel countered. Orochimaru was known for being uncaring about civilians unless they were important. Yeah, but he was more concerned about making sure his granddaughter got out safely. Trying to get through all those civilians would have slowed him down and make him easy for Obito to see him. He could have collapsed a building onto a street, plugging it and making everyone slow down or stop. He circled a large block south of the marketplace and crossed it out. This part of town was already burning, so he would have avoided it if he could. And this part, he circled another block and crossed it out, had already collapsed and would have made traversing it impossible. Bjorn stared at the map as it was now. He took the pen back and traced lines through the possible routes. That meant he would have gone through the alleyways. With what you've given, that limited his escape routes to these three. He looked at those routes. They were jagged things that stretched over a confined 2-block radius. But they also seemed to lack meaning. They couldn't describe what it all felt like, to be closed in like that, the sounds of the town being destroyed around you, a man with godlike powers chasing after you, unsure where the path you were taking would go. Nathaniel stepped close to the map. Here's the thing, he said. As soon as he gave his granddaughter to Tsunade, he ran back into the streets. He didn't even try to hide where he was doing. Of course, he would do that, he told the professor. He had tried to stay out of sight so he could protect his granddaughter. Once he had passed her off to Tsunade, he could be as open and blatant as he wanted to be. He did on purpose. So, it was to give Obito the target he wanted? Asked Isabella. He nodded. That's all there was to it. She looked down the street. She must have been imaging it. What did Obito use against Orochimaru when he chased him? The director was signaling them to move again. Naruto stepped away from the map and started down the street again. Jutsu-wise? He asked her as they followed him. That time, he stuck to using the Gudadama, truth-seeking balls, firing them down on Orochimaru. What was their top speed? He never actually thought about that. Then again, he had never really stopped to observe a Gudadama in action. He had always been busy trying to make sure that he didn't get hit by one. But now that he thought about it, he couldn't give an actual answer to that question. Off the top of my head, I would say that they were just as fast as Lee at top speed with his weights on. How fast was that? We could still see him move, even if he got a little blurry. Lee had gotten so fast with the weight on, if he had taken them off, he would have turned invisible. That's how fast he would have been moving. Isabella frowned at him. Clearly he wasn't giving her the information that she wanted. But she didn't object to that. She simply asked, was that their only speed? No. Obito was able to change their speed if he wanted. I think that he even did that when he was chasing Orochimaru. It might have been his view from behind as the chaser, but it did seem that the Uchiha took his time readying those jutsus. Bjorn had taken out the map again and quickly looked at it. Where would you say that Orochimaru was running to in the town? I don't know. After Obito had left and before we learned the truth, the common idea was that Orochimaru had a safe house or a lab somewhere in the town, and that he had been heading there so he could hide. But after that, we just figured he was running so Obito would follow him, and no one else. How strong are these good Adama? Isabella asked him. He didn't hesitate when he answered, very. I once saw Obito throw one of them through a building. It went through all the walls from one side to the other. The building collapsed because of it. The land of sound fell mainly because of that jutsu. They came to another intersection in the streets. For a brief moment Naruto didn't know where he was. The street looked different. It wasn't burning and not collapsed. He had to take a moment to remember it from the rooftops. That way, he said, pointing off to the right. We ran down that way. Isabella had another question. Tell me, Commander, she said to him, would you consider Obito's ability to fly a jutsu? If it was, it had been one I had never seen before, he remarked. That's not true, Sun argued. The Sandaime Tsuchikage had a jutsu that could make him fly. I thought that it was a jutsu that altered the weight of something, he replied. It was. So it's not really flying, is it? Did you see him in the air? Yeah, I did. Did he look like he belonged there? He did look comfortable. Was he able to move around like he knew what he was doing? Yes. He was flying. Hang on, Naruto might be right, Komi, I said. If it's just altering the weight so it's lighter or heavier, then it's not really flying. He was flying. I'm the one who knows flying. I don't change my weight when I want to move and I have to flap my wings to move. That doesn't have anything to do with flying. Excuse me. Who's got the wings here? What's that got to do with this? Alright, just stop, Naruto told the both of them. I'm getting a headache from all this shouting. They did stop their arguing, but they kept glaring at each other. The rest of the Biju watched with a small amusement. It was funny to watch the others fight. It wasn't so funny when it was one of them. Ah, just let them fight, Shikaka urged him. He was adamant when he said no. So you don't think that it was a jutsu that allowed him to fly? Isabella asked him, bringing his attention back to the present. It does have a remarkable similarity to the Sandaime Tsuchikage's jutsu allowing him to alter his weight. See? Asked Sun. Oh, shut up, Komi, snapped. He was on them fast. What did I just say? He asked. He didn't wait for an answer. If what Obito did was the same thing, I never saw him start it up. You have to remember we weren't looking for him on the ground. He was usually up in the air, watching from above. How fast did he fly? He snatched the back before it came out of his mouth. She wouldn't have appreciated it. Are you hoping for an exact number? He asked, wanting to be sure. It would be nice. She wasn't hopeful though. He shrugged his shoulders. Sorry, we never stopped to clock his speed. Bjorn chuckled, it rumbled out from his chest. I imagine he wouldn't have stopped to let that happen, he said. You would be right. Isabella wouldn't give up. A rough estimate? She asked, prodding him. He looked back at his memories, thinking about all the times he had seen Obito fly through the air. It's funny, but whenever he looked at the man, it was like he was looking back with eyes full of disdain. He had never given up on his opinion about Naruto. Neither did the blonde. The fastest I've ever seen him go was when he crossed Tadagawa while bombarding it, he finally answered. It was from a distance as the capital was in its last moments, and he was going from each side in about 10-15 seconds. With the wind or against it? She asked him. He hadn't thought of that. But as he did, he realized something. I don't think it mattered, he replied. He always seemed to move with ease through the air. It wasn't much, but Isabella was happy enough. She stopped talking to him and began looking intense in her thinking. They walked through the town following the path he remembered chasing Obito. Everywhere he looked, he could remember how the town looked the last time he had been through. When they reached a T-section in the streets, he came to a stop looking at the wall in front of them. Here, he said, coming to a stop. This is where it ended. They came to a stop around him and looked at the wall. It was a nice wall, brightly shining thanks to the sun. But he could still see it scorched with fire and splattered with blood. More than that, he could still see Orochimaru sitting against it, an irreparable wound torn through his midsection. Nathaniel looked at the wall. He saw only the wall. This is where Orochimaru died? He asked. Yeah, this is where we found him once Obito had gotten bored. He was missing an arm, His feet were broken, and it seemed like every time he breathed, blood leaked out. He saw us and asked to see the girl. It was a good thing that Sakura had been there, or we never would have known what he meant. Tsunade came with her and Anko. Orochimaru asked for her, took her in his remaining arm, and said, "Live well, Haim," kissing her on the forehead. He asked Anko to look after her, to take care of the one of the few good things he'd done in life, to care for his granddaughter. He chuckled at that memory. The only ones who probably weren't surprised by that announcement were Tsunade and Anko. Anko didn't tell him anything. She simply nodded and walked off with the baby in her arms. Bjorn was hooked into the story. What happened then? Tsunade asked to be alone with him so they could talk. Normally we would have protested. After all, Orochimaru had been a traitor to the village. But we could all see that he was dying, so we did as we were asked. She came back to us a half-hour later and told us that he was dead. And that was it? For the history books, probably, he said back. For me, it didn't stop until we got back to the village. I went to the Hokage building to double-check something with Tsunade, only to hear crying coming from her office. When I looked inside, I saw her with a bottle in one hand and a picture of her old team in the other. She cried about how she missed them, and she wanted them back. It was in that moment that he realized something. That no matter how treacherous or evil Orochimaru had been, he had still been her teammate and her friend, once. He understood it. He felt the same about Sasuke. "Did you do anything?" Isabella asked him. He shook his head. "No, there wasn't a need for me to be there. I closed the door and left her alone. She needed that time." "And cut!" shouted the director. And the somber air around them just seemed to vanish. "Nice shooting, everybody. Let's break for lunch and we'll do the medical setup next." "Are they going to need me for that?" Naruto wondered as he watched the crew start packing the equipment up. "Probably yes," Nathaniel told him, "but only for telling us what it actually looked like." He shrugged his shoulders. He figured that was why he was here. "All right, but I wasn't there the entire time. I think they'll be glad for you being there at all." He went after the crew, following them to lunch alongside Bjorn and Isabella. Naruto didn't follow them at first. He looked back at the wall. He still expected to see Orochimaru there, dying against the wall. But the bastard wasn't there. He hadn't been there for over 2,000 years. "Is this what it's going to feel like for the other places we go?" "Most likely," Kurama said. "You'll have to get used to it." There was truth in that. He would have to get used to it. He had agreed to do this documentary. There would be more places like this, places that were different now. He would see them all. It was what he wanted. He went after the others, leaving behind the scene of Orochimaru's death. Codex entry: Fashion the human suit. Few fashions from Earth have survived to this day, with new clothing ideas brought in from the Citadel races. The human suit is one of those fashions, having survived centuries of change in fashion. It is a versatile outfit that is used in various formal occasions, from weddings to college graduations, even to business meetings. It is also considered to be one of the most important things a human male should own. The human suit comes in a variety of names and titles: tuxedo, or simply tux, business suit, dress suit, even a moniker as degrading as monkey suit. However, all suits are consistent in the following factors. They consist of a three-piece set: a jacket, a buttoned, long-sleeved shirt, and long-legged pants, called trousers. They almost always require something tied around the neck, such as a necktie or a bow tie, except if the wearer wishes to wear the suit with the collar unbuttoned. They tend to be made of thin textiles, and are light. There are different variations of the human suit, but the following are the most well-known. Elemental nation suits tend to have a narrow cut, usually have 2 buttons on the breast, and have no padding in the shoulders. They have narrow trousers, and the jacket has no side vents. When tailoring for clients that expect to see conflict in the future as shinobi and samurai do, the suit is modified to have much better freedom of movement for deft movements without compromising on being presentable. Frontier suits are known as sack suits due to their loose cut. The jacket has no padding in the shoulders, and tends to have 3 buttons and a single side vent. This is due to the fact that the damned land can be considered desert, and the bagginess of the suit in formal occasions allows for a more comfortable affair for the wearer. Imperial suits, or steel suits, are somewhere in the middle between elemental and frontier suits, being tailored specifically to the wearer. The jacket emphasizes the wearer's chest, and has padded shoulders, pocket flaps, and 2 side vents. Due to how much emphasis is placed on the chest area, the suit often includes a vest in the set. Jungle suits from the Great Jungle are famous for being armored versions of any other suit. This is done without compromising the lightness of a suit, using ballistic fabrics to protect the wearer from gunshots. After humanity's introduction into the galactic center, the suit soon became popular for various individuals among many non-human races, and tailors are almost guaranteed find work for anyone that has the money. The trend in popularity is that slightly bulkier non-human races like Turians tend to favor frontier and jungle suits, while naturally slimmer races such as Asari, Solarians, and Drell prefer imperial and elemental suits.